Hey guys. Just realized I didn't even plug my headphones into my mic, so I can't hear myself. Which ostensibly is the whole point of plugging in my headphones, to hear that you guys can hear me well. Okay. There's one person. I'm starting. 2 people, oh my god. I didn't post about this anywhere or even text any of my friends. I'm sorry about the curtain. My cat is playing with the curtain. Or even text any of my friends, but I was just like, I haven't read on YouTube in a few days, and I wanted to do it at least twice a week, so I was like, today's the days. I'm going to do it more. Okay. So we are on chapter 27 of Lillian Faderman's book, The Gay Revolution Story of the Struggle. This is in part 8, Demanding to Serve. The chapter is called Get, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Done. So the last chapter was about how Don't Ask, Don't Tell became a thing. And basically, Bill Clinton ran a very gay positive election campaign, and he promised the gays that he would fix this for them, that they were criminalized in the military. And when he tried to actually pass an executive order against that happening, the Joint Chiefs, so the head of all the armed services, were like, if you do this, we're going to all resign our posts, which would obviously be a huge disaster, for one thing, for the military looking bad, internationally, is low power kind of thing, because and also because it was the beginning of Clinton's presidency, so you don't want to start off like that, generally. So then basically this is the best workaround he could get at the time, but in practice basically nothing changed, and actually it was kind of worse in some ways. So yeah. There was a story in the last chapter where, I mean, you can go and listen to it because it's on the channel, that one, where this woman got divorced from her husband and later ended up with a woman, and her husband broke into her house, his ex-wife, and found her address book and called every single person she knew to tell them that she was a raging dyke or whatever. So because of that, the military found out, obviously, that she was a lesbian, and then she got kicked out of the military. Yeah. Oh, hey, Izzy. Hey, Karen. Hey, Ghost. Okay, so I'm going to start reading. In this book, I feel since I started halfway, or not even halfway, since I started 3/4 of the way through the book, that it's kind of or 2/3, whatever. I kind of am being very casual about it, so I'm going to stop and give commentary, and if it mentions people that I remember from the past of the book, I will try and give context of who they are. Also, if you guys have things to say in the live chat, go for it, and then I'll look up once in a while, and if I feel like it, I'll respond to them. Okay? Get, don't ask, don't tell, done. Justice at tortoise speed. As a senator from Illinois, Barack Obama abhorred don't ask, don't tell. Gays and lesbians had a right to serve their country, he resolutely declared in 2007. Just as black people had integrated into the military, gays and lesbians should be, too, he said. He won gay and lesbian hearts, this young, eloquent, forthright champion of justice who belonged to a persecuted minority and was in tune with other persecuted minorities. As a candidate for the 2008 Democratic presidential nomination, Obama was more slippery. His major rival, Hillary Clinton, had opened herself up from the start to the LGBT media, giving interviews to LGBT newspapers, appearing on the LGBT television channel Logo, telling the community in person how strong a champion for their rights she'd be. The Obama campaign placed ads in LGBT papers, but Obama wouldn't talk to anyone from the gay media. Finally, 2 weeks before the April 27th Pennsylvania primary, he did a careful interview for The Advocate with a friendly, vetted interviewer, female, young, no radical baggage. Obama's answers to Carrie Eleven's "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" questions were oddly cautious, as though he were speaking not to gays and lesbians who comprised the Advocate's readership, but to spies peering over their shoulder. He'd never make the repeal of "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" a litmus test for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he firmly told Eleveld, almost scolding in his tone. There were, quote, so many issues that a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had to deal with, and my paramount obligation would be to get the best possible people to keep America safe, end quote. He did grant that it was counterproductive for the military to be spending large sums of money. Oh my god, in the last chapter, it said in the 16 years of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, they spent, I think, $1.3 billion investigating gays in like the armed services, which is like fucking insane. One of the things that Clinton was trying to like use to sell Don't Ask, Don't Tell was to be like it's going to save money because you don't have to like look out for the gays anymore. Like I said, functionally it didn't really change much. Kicking out highly qualified personnel. Yeah, that's something else too that in the last chapter, some of the people that got kicked out were like very like had like 20 years of experience and did jobs like whatever. They were in like high positions and did like jobs that they were like eminently qualified for that you couldn't find somebody else who had the same experience to just replace them. So like they could prove and that they were like it was like a loss to the military to kick out gay people basically. Like in a like very like empirical way. But he immediately followed that point by going back to his first. What I want are members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who are making decisions based on what strengthens our military and what is going to make us safe, not ideology. After such disappointed wariness, it was pleasantly surprising for gays and lesbians that during Obama's first week as president, he called a meeting with Secretary of Defense Robert Gates and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Admiral Michael Mullen, both Republican appointees, and told them, as he later recalled, I think Don't Ask, Don't Tell is wrong. So I want you guys to understand that I want to work with the Pentagon. I want to figure out how to do this right, but I intend to repeal this policy. The Secretary of Defense was taken aback. Like Bill Clinton, Obama had never even served in the armed forces, and yet he too was jumping ahead into the military issue even before all his suits were hanging up in the presidential suite closet. Gates would later claim resentfully, the only military matter apart from leaks about which I ever sensed deep passion on Obama's part was Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was something else with Clinton, because he was trying to say, like, we need to do this, basically, because there's already gays serving in the military, and they shouldn't have, like, they shouldn't be dishonorably discharged just because they're gay. And the military people's, like, the chief's response was, it'll destroy the morale of the military, and you don't understand because you haven't served. Yeah. So I assume they're going to make similar arguments in this chapter. Despite Obama's putative passion, as Carrie Eleveld observed in August 2009, 7 months had already passed in his presidency and nothing was happening. The issue of repeal, she complained, seemed to get dropped like a hot potato. It wasn't precisely that Obama had dropped the issue, but he'd been unready, just as Clinton had been, for the blowback. He slowed to a crawl on repeal. Lesbian and gay leaders, frustrated yet again by a president whom they supported with gusto, tried to prod him. The times had changed, they insisted. In 1993, when Clinton backpedaled, only 40% of Americans had said yes to the question, should gay men and lesbians be allowed to serve openly in the military? It might be understandable that Clinton retreated in the 1990s, but in the next decade and a half, mainstream gay and lesbian groups, the Human Rights Campaign, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, Lambda Legal, the Service Members Legal Defense Network, had grown huge membership lists and could boast impressive financial resources. Thanks to their incessant work, the shift in public opinion was more and more dazzling. In spring 2009, Gallup poll showed that 69% of Americans were now saying yes to the question of whether gay men and lesbians should be allowed to serve openly in the military. And the Democrats had big majorities in Congress too. Obama had no reason not to go forward. The circumstances couldn't be better. He needed to act now, LGBT leaders said. Sorry, one second. Sorry. But a memo from Admiral Mullen's legal advisor said the opposite. Now is not the time to lift the ban, the memo warned. America was in the midst of two wars. It was crucial not to do anything that might interfere with winning in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there was no way of predicting what would happen if homosexuals who weren't willing to keep quiet about their sexuality were suddenly allowed to serve. An open letter to President Obama from the Center for Military Readiness, a far-right organization that claimed to represent over 1,000 retired military officers, said the same thing, replete with old chestnuts about how open homosexuality would damage military morale, unit cohesion, and readiness. The 1,000-plus retired officers even warned that the presence of homosexuals would destroy the all-volunteer force because it would have adverse effects on the willingness of parents who lend their sons and daughters to military service. Secretary Gates also chimed in to remind Obama that it was Congress that had passed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. If the policy were to be gotten rid of, it shouldn't be by presidential executive order. It should be Congress that repealed it. In April, Gates proposed that he appoint a task force to study what the best way might be to implement a change and what impact could be expected as a result of the change. President Obama feared repeating President Clinton's early missteps, and he was stretched thin managing two wars and a financial crisis. And he wanted to follow through on his biggest ambition to reform America's healthcare system. He agreed to Gates' proposal. Gates was in no rush. He made an informal study first. He sat with 10 junior enlisted soldiers over lunch and queried them about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They told him, if gays are allowed to serve, there'll be violence. They asked him whether combat armed units, at least, could be exempted from having gay soldiers foisted upon them. Soon after doing his study, Gates, speaking for himself and the president, opined on television at comically mixed metaphors. The president and I feel like we've got a lot on our plates right now, and let's push that one down the road a little bit. During the first year of Obama's administration, 169 more women and 259 more men were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's in 1 year, guys. Isn't that insane? Right. Including 59 Arabic linguists whose services were desperately needed while the United States was advising and training Iraqi security forces in preparation for the American pullout. Members of Congress, who thought such a senseless discharge policy needed to be stopped, had a tough battle ahead. In June 2008, the only out lesbian congressman, Tammy Baldwin, proposed to Barney Frank that they start an LGBT equality caucus, which would include any congressman member who supported full equality for LGBT citizens. It would facilitate counting the votes to see how much support could be relied on if Don't Ask, Don't Tell were brought to the House floor. It would be a whip operation, too. Members would work to get votes from those in their circle of influence. About 100 of the 435 members of Congress joined the Equality Caucus. I don't know a shit ton about American politics, but it seems like a big number to me. In June 2009, Patrick Murphy, congressman from Philadelphia, went around the House of Representatives gathering signatures for the bill he had sponsored to get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The pro-repeal contingent in the House couldn't have a better standard bearer. He'd been a paratrooper in Bosnia and Baghdad and had received a Bronze Star for bravery. He was the first Iraqi war vet elected to Congress. He was a liberal, blue dog Democrat, claimed him as one of their own when he was elected in 2006. But on the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Murphy was passionate. Why is a straight Irish Catholic former altar boy of the year in 1987 at St. Anthony's fighting for this? He asked jocularly. It's because I took an oath as a congressman to support the Constitution and what the Constitution stands for, and that's equality, he answered solemnly. He persuaded 170 of his fellow representatives to sign on as co-sponsors of the repeal bill. But that was no guarantee of success, and there were already signs that the battle would be a long one. Murphy, who was a member of the House of Armed Services Committee, tried to get the committee's chairman, Ike Skelton, to hold hearings on repeal. Skelton was a socially conservative Democrat from Missouri, pro-gun, anti-abortion, and as rabidly gay as his fellow Missourians had been in the days of Professor E.K. Johnston. That's a professor from the very first chapter, I think, who was a journalism professor who in the 50s lost his entire life, basically, like every part of his life, like his job, his prestige, his savings, whatever, because he was outed as gay by the cops. He'd been in the House since the 1970s and had helped craft Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the 1990s. He declared flatly, I am personally not for changing the law. Why? He feared that having a national debate on the issue would dump the subject of homosexuality onto America's breakfast tables. What do mommies and daddies say to their 7-year-old child? He asked in all seriousness. But opposition wasn't only from the Boers, as Florida Congressman Al C. Hastings found out when he tried to nudge the repeal issue. Hastings, an African American, had been elected to the House of Representatives in 1992, part of the first significant wave of black politicians to be sent to Congress since Reconstruction. He was committed to fighting not only for the rights of African Americans, but for the rights of sexual minorities as well. In May 2009, he and 76 other Democratic members of Congress, many of them from the Congressional Black Caucus, sent Obama a letter asking him to take leadership on the issue of Don't Ask, Don't Tell right away. No answer. When the president didn't respond, Hastings proposed a simple amendment to the defense appropriation bill on the House floor. The military may not spend money to investigate gay and lesbian personnel or to discharge them. He was forced to withdraw it the next day under pressure from the White House. Interesting. I guess Obama knew the blowback would be severe. I mean, I guess I don't fucking understand. Obviously I don't have any more knowledge than this book is giving me. There's no doubt that Barack Obama genuinely wanted a military that was open to anyone willing and able to serve. Yet, he feared weakening his presidency. His frustration was palpable. In October 2009, he accepted an invitation to speak at a dinner for 3,000 members of the 1.5 million member strong Human Rights Campaign, the gay civil rights advocacy organization that had grown out of the Steve Eden's tiny gay rights national lobby. The president of the Human Rights Campaign, Joel Solmonese, introduced the President of the United States by saying, "We have never had a stronger ally in the White House. Never." But Obama knew, and his audience knew, that thus far his track record did not bear that out. In his speech, stirring as always, Obama said all the things about repeal that he'd always believed, such as, we should not be punishing patriotic Americans who have stepped forward to serve the country. We could be celebrating their willingness to show courage. He acknowledged, sadly, it's no secret that our progress may be taking longer than we'd like, but he pledged yet again, I will end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He got a standing ovation, but many among his 3,000 listeners had reached the breaking point in their patience. It was a brilliant speech, Cleve Jones, the Harvey Milk assistant who'd created the AIDS quilt, observed with cynicism, but it lacked the answer to our most pressing question, which is when. January 27th, 2010, President Obama's first State of the Union address. In front of all of America, he repeated the promise. This year, I will work with Congress and the military to finally repeal the law that denies gay Americans the right to serve the country they love because of who they are. It's the right thing to do. Secretary of Defense Gates later claimed that he was, quote-unquote, blindsided by the announcement. Though it had been a solid year since Obama's first week in office, when he told Gates and Admiral Mullen emphatically, I intend to repeal this policy. But Gates offered again, as he had during Obama's first year, to direct the Department of Defense to do a study of all the issues associated with repeal. It would be through a top-to-bottom review done by a comprehensive review working group. Of course, it would take until the end of the year to complete such a wide-ranging inquiry. Again, President Obama agreed. Even before the Comprehensive Review Working Group could start its work, the opposition to it was fierce. In February, the Senate Armed Service Committee listened to the testimony of officers such as 4-star Marine Corps General James Conway, who told the senators that the important question wasn't whether the policy was fair to homosexuals, but whether it would enhance the war-fighting capabilities of the military. Never mind waiting for a Pentagon survey, Conway had done his own, he claimed, and this survey indicated that it wasn't age or rank dependent. It didn't matter where the service member was from. All of them were against the repeal. My best military advice to this committee, to the Secretary of Defense, to the President, would be to keep the law as it is, General Conway declared. I'm pretty, anti-military, but I saw this thing on Instagram that was a helicopter squad or something. I don't know anything about the military. And it was like entirely gay. It was all gay guys. Just reading this is so weird. This is like 10 years ago. Like, clearly the military didn't fall to pieces when the gays came out. Just like how marriage didn't just get destroyed when the gays got marriage. Like, clearly it was fine. I don't know. Democrats in Congress who wanted repeal guessed they didn't have a lot of time. They couldn't count on keeping their comfortable majority much longer because the party in power usually loses seats at midterm elections, which were coming up in November 2010. I'm sorry. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who had been gay-friendly since her early days in the Democratic politics in San Francisco, made a proposal for an immediate measure. While the Department of Defense was conducting its extensive review, the president could at least place a moratorium on dismissing gays and lesbian service members. Bad idea, Secretary Gates said. Nothing at all should be done until the study was completed. Heated hearings began in May 2010. The military is not a social experiment, a Republican representative from Texas harangued. We should at least wait to hear from military before taking action. If we don't, we're saying, we're shoving this down your throat. We don't care. 26 countries already allow homosexuals to serve openly, Frank fairly growled at congressmen. Those who tell me that the presence of gay and lesbian members in the military undermines the effectiveness of a fighting force and undermine the unit cohesion have never heard of Israel. Arguments like Frank's seemed to prevail on May 27, 2010, when the White House voted 234 to 194 to pass the Murphy Amendment. But the vote didn't mean that gays and lesbians could start serving openly. No changes were to take effect until the Pentagon completed its study. In the meantime, Obama's Justice Department kept filing briefs defending the constitutionality of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's why. Even in September, 4 months after the House vote, 19 months after President Obama told the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Secretary of Defense that he wanted to lift the ban, Obama's Justice Department was still defending Don't Ask, Don't Tell in court, appealing the decisions of a federal judge in California who ruled that Don't Ask, Don't Tell encroached on service members' right to free speech and that the government had failed to come up with any evidence that the law was necessary to protect governmental interests. This has been like a theme since the beginning of the book. That there's like a couple of constitutional rights people have, like privacy and freedom of speech, and some other stuff I don't remember. That basically, like, any laws against like sodomy, for example, as they have in like all the armed services at this point, apparently, breach those laws, breach those constitutional rights. And then, like, you'll have, like, lower courts that will rule that over and over and over again, and then the military will just ignore it because they're the military, apparently. What was going on that the Justice Department was fighting in favor of Don't Ask, Don't Tell? The confused media wanted to know. Hadn't the president said he thought it was a bad policy? Hadn't the House voted to get rid of it? Why was the Justice Department acting as though the administration favored the policy? Furious gays and lesbians and their supporters protested that the President of the United States should have, told the Justice Department not to appeal. Presidential Press Secretary Robert Gibbs found himself in the awkward position of having to defend his boss, his defending of a law he'd said made no sense. One of the highest ranking service members ever to suffer under Don't Ask, Don't Tell was Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach, who'd served in the Air Force for 19 years, flying 88 combat missions over Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kosovo. He'd often been handpicked for missions that required a sort of exceptional abilities that he had in abundance. His hit rate was 98.4%. The macho-looking Fehrenbach claimed that everyone on base knew he was gay. He'd had absolutely zero negative reactions from his comrades. But because Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still policy when Fehrenbach's homosexuality came to the attention of the commander of the Idaho Mountain Home Air Force Base, where he'd been stationed, a military board recommended discharge. While Fehrenbach fought his discharge, formidable enemies fought to keep service members like him out of the military. One of the most formidable, Senator John McCain, had been an aviator just as Fehrenbach had. He had been shot down in a 1967 bombing mission in Vietnam, had suffered almost 6 years of imprisonment and torture in Hanoi, and had turned down early release, proclaiming that he wouldn't leave until all the men who'd been captured before him were permitted to leave. His military heroism gave him tremendous authority on the Senate Armed Service Committee, and he believed homosexuals would ruin the military. The Pentagon was doing the wrong sort of study, John McCain complained to his committee. The question shouldn't be how repeal could be implemented, it should be how repeal would affect battle readiness and morale. The president's study ought to be scratched. The Pentagon ought to start again. Anyway, regardless of what the Pentagon report might say, there needed to be a lot more congressional hearings, McCain insisted. Okay, I'm taking off my headphones because, I heard myself. The sound is clear. If it's not loud enough, let me know. I can turn up so you guys hear it better. And my headphones are just a coward, a bigot, and a pathological liar. In April 2010, as President Obama was about to make his final defense budget recommendations to the House and Senate Armed Service Committee, Aubrey Sarvis, head of the Service Members Legal Defense Network, wrote to him. Sarvis, representing the organization that had been formed by gay lawyers soon after Don't Ask, Don't Tell became law, reminded Obama of his promise in his State of the Union address 3 months earlier. I will work with Congress and the military to finally repeal the law that denies gay Americans the right to serve the country they love because of who they are, the president had righteously declaimed. Now, Sarvis pleaded with him to reaffirm your strong commitment to repeal before signing off on the defense budget. At the least, say something about cutting out the budget that funds used to investigate people's private lives in order to axe them. The commander-in-chief never deigned to respond. There was no profile in courage at the White House, Sarvis said, sarcasm uncontained. Rumors were also flying about that Obama's congressional liaison team was urging Democrats in Congress to block a vote on repeal because it was a midterm election year. By now, a total of 14,346 service members had been discharged since the start of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. If Obama was really sincere about getting rid of the policy, why didn't he just issue an executive order? Even if he had to wait on implementing the how-to of repeal until the Pentagon submitted its study, why didn't he at least put a halt to the discharges? He's a coward, a bigot, and a pathological liar, former Army captain and JAG lawyer James Pietrangelo complained to the press. Pietrangelo had been in both the First and Second Iraq Wars. He was booted out of the army just before his third tour of duty because he admitted he was gay. He tried to take his case to the Supreme Court, but the move was blocked by Obama Solicitor General Elena Kagan, future Supreme Court Justice. As Solicitor General, Kagan's role was to represent the federal government's position before the Supreme Court. She argued that the ban on gays in the military was indeed rationally related to the government's interest in military discipline and cohesion. Captain Pietrangelo was furious. He was ready for some old-fashioned gay militant action, as were other discharged service members, such as Dan Choi, a first lieutenant who served as an infantry officer at the height of the Iraqi surge. Choi, son of a Korean immigrant Southern Baptist minister, had been a founding member of Knights Out, like Knights, as in like Knights of Shining Armor, a group of gay West Point alums formed to protest the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. In March 2009, he was invited to be interviewed about Knights Out on the Rachel Maddow show. In his television interview, he told, Choi's skill as an Arabic linguist had been vital to the military, but he was discharged anyway. The Army sent him a letter giving him a choice. He could take an honorable discharge and walk away with full benefits such as medical care and pension, or he could fight his discharge and maybe end up with nothing. For him, it was a no-brainer. He'd fight. Putting a face on it. Since 1993, the Service Members Legal Defense Network had offered legal aid to gays and lesbians kicked out of the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It had also been a watchdog, tracking the discharges and ensuing annual reports that were wryly titled, like Randy Schiff's famous 1993 book about gays in the militaries, Conduct Unbecoming. The reports showed that under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, investigations of lesbians and gay servicemen were as bad, if not worse, than before. Persecution, too, had gotten worse because the policy had stirred up a hornet's nest of homophobia, which culminated in the brutal 1999 murder at Fort Campbell of Army PFC Barry Winchell, bludgeoned with a baseball bat by another soldier who learned that Winchell was dating a transgender showgirl. Dr. Alan Steinman had known about the service members legal defense network for a long time, but it took a few years after he left the service before he dared send a fax to SLDN's Washington, D.C. office. I'm a retired gay admiral living near Seattle. How can I help? Dixon Osborne, co-founder of the group and Aubrey Sarvis's predecessor as executive director, faxed back immediately, imploring Dr. Steinman to come to SLDN headquarters. Rear Admiral Steinman had been in the Coast Guard since 1972, when he was commissioned by the Public Health Service as a lieutenant. For a while, he'd been a flight surgeon, tending to air crewmen. He'd sometimes had to stop one of his patients who seemed on the verge of coming out to him because it would have been Steinman's duty to report him as a homosexual. All through his 25 years of service, Steinman knew he himself was gay, but he told no one, not even his family. There was really nothing to tell, he always thought, because for 25 years he was celibate, afraid to be caught and thrown out of the job to which he dedicated his life. Steinman was promoted to admiral in June 1993, shortly before Don't Ask, Don't Tell went into effect. He became the Coast Guard's Surgeon General. But his wonderful promotion exacerbated his fears and complicated his life. He was obliged to attend formal functions to which admirals always took their ladies. By the 1990s, the fib of the beard had stopped being necessary for gay men and lesbians, unless, of course, you were in the military. The admiral had to find a female beard, just like gays in the 1950s and 60s did when they were obliged to pass for straight. He also had to figure out how to do it safely. The Washingtonian, a sophisticated upscale magazine, had a In Search Of section. He placed an ad. Gay male executive seeks female companion to assist with social obligations, it read. In about a week, he got a beautifully written letter from a woman who said she'd been married to a bisexual man whose gay friends had become like a family to them. She volunteered at AIDS clinics too, and she would be delighted to assist with the executive's social obligations. When they met at the Ritz-Carlton in Pentagon City, Steinman could see that Muriel Key would be perfect, intelligent, well-dressed, presentable-looking. They hit it off immediately and would become great friends. Key had been a costume designer and loved high theater, which is what she and the admiral would play in lavish settings such as military balls, where they'd make an entrance and be introduced in extravagant 1930s Hollywood style. The admiral Alan Steinman and his lady, Muriel Key, the spotlight shining on them as they descended the circular staircase, the admiral in his uniform, his lady in her elegant evening gown, the drum and bugle corps, and the commandant's own band playing in the background. That, in lure of home life and the comfort of intimacy with a loving partner, was how top-ranked gay officers survived in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. December 2003, the 10th anniversary of the issuance of the Department of Defense's Directive 1304.26, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the service members legal defense network orchestrated a grand coming out for Admiral Steinman, together with Virgil Richard and Keith Kerr, two brigadier generals who retired from the Army. The New York Times opened its page to the three most senior military officers ever willing to slip off their heterosexual masquerade masks. They'd been forced to lie to their friends, family, and colleagues to, quote, evade and deceive others about a natural part of our identity, end quote, in order to serve their country, the admiral and two generals said. But Americans needed to know the people that the policy threatened and often destroyed. Now the admiral and generals would put a face on it. Americans needed to know not just about the highly decorated officers, but also about the youngsters who joined the military with sincere love of country. Admiral Steinman also became advisor to the Call to Duty tour, which brought together young gay and lesbian vets and sent them out, especially to the red states, to tell their stories about how they'd served with devotion and faultless records and had been discharged only because they were gay, or had left before being cooked out because the stresses and strains of hiding were intolerable. By design, to destroy the stereotypes that were driving a lot of the antipathy, the Call to Duty vets were mostly strapping, straight arrow looking young men. Call to Duty was criticized by some in the gay community for not selecting a more representative spectrum of gays and lesbians. The Admiral felt assured that they were making dents in places like Knoxville, Tennessee, where he watched as a man in uniform walked in and sat down at the back of the auditorium while the Call to Duty speakers told their story. During the Q&A, somebody asked the usual shower questions. The man in the back raised his hand and introduced himself as an active duty special forces officer in his 18th year of service. Early in his military career, he'd had a gay roommate, and a damn fine soldier, he grunted. But still, I didn't agree with his lifestyle. But, he said, he just listened to the 5 young vets tell their stories about being good members of the military family and being cast out by Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and he was deeply moved. He pointed to each of the speakers on the dais, saying, I'd be honored, 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 honored to serve with any of you guys. Call to Duty soon had emulators, such as the human rights campaign Voices of Honor, which featured Eric Alva, a feisty 5'1" Marine. Alva, a third generation military man from a Latino family, had a compelling story. He joined the military in the 1990s, served in Somalia and Japan, and was promoted to a staff sergeant, but he left the service in 2003 when his right leg was blown off in Iraq. Alva had been in charge of an 11-man logistical unit. One morning, at the start of the war, his convoy departed Kuwait and drove to Basra when he had been called during the first, where he had been called on what had been called during the first war in Iraq in the 1990s the Highway of Death. When the convoy reached its destination and Staff Sergeant Alva got out of his Humvee, ready to take charge, when he stepped on a landmine buried in the sand. He had the sad distinction of being the first American casualty of Operation Iraqi Freedom. As Alva lay recovering in a Bethesda military hospital, George and Laura Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld all paid their respects, with shoals of photographers in tow. President Bush pinned a Purple Heart on him. Staff Sergeant Alva liked to tell his Voices of Honor audiences that each time he was praised for his courage by the VIPs who had pictures taken of themselves beaming down on him in his hospital bed, he remembered how scared he'd been all through his years in the service that his superiors would find out that he was gay and he'd be kicked out. But, stirring as such stories may have been, the polite panels that groups such as the Human Rights Campaign sent out on the road didn't convey such raw rage of discharged gays like James Pietrangelo or Dan Choi, who disdained well-funded, well-mannered gay organizations. They labeled them with sneering moniker Gay Inc., which is like, I think that was first used in the 60s. Yeah, like around the time of Stonewall. There seemed to be this like separation of like the streets and the suits of like Gay Inc., like the people with money who were like trying to do things like the right way in like, the legal system, and then you had like the streets who were like the more like militant radical types. Radicals would have heartily approved of their angry rhetoric, even while finding their goals to get back in the military execrable. Jesus up on the cross did not have a party with all his major donors and raise money for him. Choi mocked HRC. Gandhi did not need 3-course dinners and a cocktail party to get his message out. The organization that Choi and Pietrangelo wanted to start in early 2010. Okay. Robin McGee, an effervescent young lesbian, was a Mississippi transplant to Central California and an unlikely radical activist. McGee had been a PTA president at her 5-year-old son Sebastian's Catholic elementary school in Fresno. She'd never hidden the fact at the school that she was a lesbian and had married her partner in June 2008 as soon as it became legal, and both of them were mom to her two children. It seemed no one at the school cared, and she didn't make an issue of it when she led the PTA. She raised more money for St. Helens than had any PTA president before her. Silent auctions, walkathons, cheerleading for school spirit. But the parish priest in charge of St. Helens, Father Salvatore Gonzalez, asked her to resign 4 days after the November 2008 election. She'd given an interview to the local paper about a candlelight vigil she organized against Proposition 8, the proposition that reversed the 6-month-old California Supreme Court ruling that had allowed her and her partner of 18 and 18,000 other same-sex couples to marry. The Catholic Church had been a major supporter of Prop 8. That same election day, the proposition was passed. McGee had lifted Sebastian up in the polling booth and had him pull the lever for Obama. This man will protect our family, she told him with unquestioning faith in the candidate's goodwill. But in quick succession, California voters denied gay people the right to marry, and she got fired from the PTA. It was clear McGee thought that trying to change hearts and minds, the "we've got to get America to like us more" approach of groups such as the Human Rights Campaign and the Service Members Legal Defense Network, and her own approach too, hadn't made an impression on the American psyche. What the movement really needed was the loud confrontational tactics of the Gay Activist Alliance, ACT UP, and all the other gay groups that had popped up through the years and then receded, muffled by Gay Inc. Gays and lesbians have lobbied for years and years, McGee complained to her wife and everyone else who'd listen. We've manned thousands of phone banks. We've walked the precincts for politicians who promised to support us and didn't. Now it's time to rumble. The following year, McGee threw her considerable energy into co-directing a grassroots national equality march on Washington, where she was discovered by the gay heir to the Progressive insurance fortune, Jonathan Lewis. He'd been a major donor to the Human Rights Campaign, but he was disillusioned. I've fallen in love with your call for aggressive action. I'm tired of us playing nice. I want trash cans overturned, cars on fire, he told McGee. He'd give her and young gay male activist Kip Williams $440,000 dollars in seed money to start a gloves-off organization that would fight with the foes with the biggest action that your group can pull off. Violence wasn't what McGee had in mind, but civil disobedience was. She and Williams accepted Lewis's offer and founded Get Equal. They put out a call to gays and lesbians everywhere. Are you willing to take arrestable action? Dan Choi and James Piertangelo were among her first recruits. She explained to them that her group was funded by a billionaire who wants to die equal. Get Equal's first action in March 18th, 2010, planned out by Choi like he would plan a military mission in the army, was a don't ask, don't tell protest. McGee alerted the news media. Then she, Choi, and Piertangelo went down to Pennsylvania Avenue. Will you do the honors? Choi asked McGee. Yes, I'd be honored, she replied. And as a cameraman clicked away, McGee chained the two discharged service members to the White House fence. I shouldn't have to be doing this. I should be at home with my kids, watching them grow up, McGee shouted to the press. She was a Middle America PTA mom, she informed the media. That would be her persona throughout her activism. She was different from other PTA moms only because her spouse was a woman, and she was engaging in dramatic civil disobedience only because the government hadn't listened to less histrionic pleas to honor families like hers. 20 Secret Service agents quickly descended with guns pointed. The police had to use bolt cutters to remove the handcuffs from the fence. McGee, Choi, and Piertangelo were arrested by the U.S. Park Police. McGee spent 6 hours in jail and was fined $35 for disturbance of peace. Choi and Piertangelo both refused to pay the $100 fines levied on them. They were brought to court in leg shackles and cuffs. When the judge asked, "How do you plead?" Dan and Choi shouted to the press and everyone in earshot, "Not guilty, not ashamed, and not finished." As soon as McGee was released, she got on a plane back to California and her family. But she was in D.C. again in April and in May to repeat the chain to the White House fence zap. A zap is like a very dramatic civil disobedience with its primary purpose being to get attention and media awareness. usually meant to shame people in positions of power. Um, yeah, they're like peppered throughout the book. They started in the 60s by the radical streets type activists. Yeah, the 60s. She did it again in November, joined this time by a slew of ex-service members who did the chaining honors for one another. Miriam Ben Shalom, the drill sergeant who fought the army and won in the 1980s, was among them. 62 years old by now, dressed in army fatigues and combat boots, Ben Shalom announced to the media before she and other protesters were unfastened from the French and dragged off to jail that, though 17 years had passed, she was still forced to protest the injustice and hypocrisy of a failed law. Dan Choi, also in military fatigues, shouted at the TV cameras, "We have served our country valiantly to defend our freedom and justice, and now it is time for our leaders to do the same." He called the president a silent homophobe. Such anxieties about whether Don't Ask, Don't Tell would get repealed reinvigorated the old internecine wars in the gay and lesbian movement. Queers, the true spiritual descendants of the radicals of the 70s. I don't know if I would say that. I don't agree with that. Okay. Couldn't understand why any gay person would give a damn about being discharged from the military or why he or she would sign up in the first place. Okay, in that sense, they are the descendants in that sense. Queers were disgusted at the distance the movement had traveled from the culture of resistance that had started everything. It had been freaks, outsiders, troublemakers, queers said, that had kick-started the movement as far back as the 1950s when communist Harry Hay dreamed up the radical Mattachine. It had been freaks, outsiders, and troublemakers who triggered the Stonewall riots. Genderqueer activist Matilda Bernstein Sycamore had been an act-upper. She'd founded the In-Your-Face Fed Up Queers, FUQ. Now she complained on behalf of a collective that dubbed itself Against Equality. The movement's freaks, outsiders, and troublemakers had been replaced by white gays in white t-shirts, applying for community spirit credit cards, and fighting to be included in the most blatant institution of the US imperialism. Queers derided gay service members, uh, yeah, who were in a tizzy not about the atrocities of war and killing of innocent civilians, but about whether they could list their boyfriends as next of kin should they get killed fighting an imperialist war. Queers despised both the mainstream groups such as Service Members Legal Defense Network and the militant groups such that filched the protest techniques of the radicals. Under McGee's direction, Get Equal dogged congressional leaders. Dan Choi, a media darling because of his striking story, and a gay Asian American Arab linguist West Point grad, starred in many of the Get Equal zaps, wearing his army uniform and all his medals. 3 months before the 2010 midterm elections, Harry Reid, Senate Majority Head and the senator from Nevada, was the invited speaker at an annual convention of Netroots Nation. Thousands of liberal bloggers and activists who'd been convening at the Rio Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. In a dramatic gesture calculated to win headlines, Choi, who'd just gotten his official discharge letter from the army, wrote an angry note to Senator Reid, which he gave to the event moderator along with his West Point ring. He asked her to hand the ring to Senator Reid during the Q&A and read out Choi's message. "This ring means nothing to me if you don't repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell." An embarrassed Reid, his majority party had still made next to no progress on the issue, tried to return the ring. "You earned it," he called out to Choi, but many in the audience were yelling, "Keep it, Don't Ask, Don't Tell till Don't Ask, Don't Tell is repeal. Repeal, Don't Ask, Don't Tell." A poll of Nevada voters taken the month before had shown that Tea Party star Sharon Angel had a very worrisome lead over Harry Reid, 50% to 39%. He'd come to Netroots Nation hoping to spur liberals and progressives to get themselves to the voting booths in November to help him beat her. The senator knew what he must do next. He invited Dan Choi up on stage where he gave the ex-lieutenant a warm public hug. "I'll get this ring back to you soon," the head of the Senate solemnly promised Choi in front of an audience that had already shouted out where his sympathies lie. This is done. Meanwhile, The Comprehensive Review Working Group's study that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates had ordered was underway. Surveys were sent out to 400,000 active duty reserve troops. Fuck, that's an insane number. That's nuts. Actually, I don't know how many people there are in the American military, but that seems like a really huge number to me. Separate surveys were sent out to 150,000 military spouses, asking, for instance, about their level of comfort with openly gay people being around their kids in military base housing. Military personnel were encouraged to send anonymous comments to an online Dropbox. Focus groups were formed and their responses were recorded. Results were tabulated and analyzed. More than 70% of the respondents said that the effect of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell would be positive, mixed, or non existent. That there were already regulations in place that said anyone who disrupted the military mission by any sort of inappropriate sexual behavior would be in trouble, and that they didn't have a lot of anxiety that gays and lesbians would disrupt the mission to the armed forces by making passes at them. Most troops said that they were already serving with someone they believed to be gay or lesbian, and 92% said the effect of unit cohesion was very good, or neutral. The Comprehensive Review Working Group reported that their study also affirmed that any objections to openly gay colleagues would drop once they were able to live and serve alongside them. Even though America was still at war, the group concluded, there'd be few problems if the ban were lifted now. The report of the study was scheduled to be in the president's hands on December 1st, but it was leaked to the press 3 weeks early. A New York Times headline announced on November 11th, Pentagon group finds there is minimal risk in lifting gay ban during war. General James Amos, the military corps commandant, didn't believe it. He continued to argue. As he had at the Joint Chiefs of Staff meetings back in 2009, when Obama first raised the issue, that it was risky to let homosexuals serve openly. There is nothing more intimate than young men and young women. When you talk of infantry, we're talking about young men lying out, sleeping alongside one another, sharing death, fear, and loss of brothers. Okay, but they've already been there doing that. So what the fuck is the difference if they're open about it or not? Like, as if they've been sleeping next to them this whole time, and that as soon as they came out, they would suddenly be like sexually assaulting them. It doesn't even make any fucking sense. He declared emotionally, and he reiterated that study or no study, nobody could be sure what the effect will be on cohesion and combat readiness if gays were a part of the sleeping alongside one another. But like, if there's somebody in the military, I assume, who is like an issue, like this person is behaving in a way that is an issue to the rest of their unit, presumably there are things other than Don't Ask, Don't Tell that would like be a deterrent for this person acting in ways that are like disruptive. You know? Why do you need a gay specific law for that? Senator John McCain wasn't convinced by the study's findings either. First of all, it was the wrong study, he complained again. The question should have been about how the armed forces can implement a repeal about the law. Shouldn't have been about how the armed forces can implement a repeal of the law, but whether the law should be repealed at all. But they literally got that information. She just presented that information that like 92% said that the effect of knowing one of your service members was gay or lesbian had like a very good or neutral effect on unit cohesion. So they also got that information. So this is just like some political bullshit. And anyway, only about a quarter of the 400,000 service members responded to the group's questionnaire. A quarter is a huge amount. Like, when people do polls for like political stuff, like in a country, like for like a federal election or something, they're not going to like poll half of the citizenship. They polled like a few thousand, and then they're like, yeah, this is representative of this area. Like another political bullshit. The others didn't respond because they believed repeal was a done deal. It was being foisted on them, and no matter how much they complained, it wouldn't matter. But they'd let their feelings be known with their feet, McCain warned his fellow senators. Most military personnel will change their career plans if the policy is changed. He wanted to start a discussion all over again. He wanted a referendum. The boys in the service should be allowed to vote on whether to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, he insisted. In May, the House had passed an amendment to the defense budget that would repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell contingent on the Pentagon's report. On December 15th, the representatives voted again, this time on Don't Ask, Don't Tell Repeal Act, a standalone bill. After the ayes and the nays were tallied by the clerk, Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Barney Frank up to the speaker's chair and gave him her gavel and asked him to announce the vote. It was a fitting gesture for the gay congressman who tried to prevent Clinton's disastrous, honorable compromise 18 years earlier. That's what Clinton called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Because he thought, like, at least it's not outright illegal. It's not like a crime to be gay in the military. But as we saw, like, in practical terms, it made no difference. Or made things worse, even. Barney Frank called out in his gravely voice 250 to 175, and on the speaker's podium, he gavelled Don't Ask, Don't Tell to perdition in the House. In the Senate, the fate of Don't Ask, Don't Tell wasn't so clear, despite Repeal's stalwart supporters. Senator Joe Lieberman had once been a top Democrat, even selected by Al Gore to be his presidential running mate in the 2000 election. Lieberman had left the party 6 years later after losing a primary race to an anti-war candidate. To win his re-election bid, he became an independent. His liberal political credentials were not reliable. He also practiced Orthodox Judaism, which, like most religious orthodoxy, wasn't very sympathetic to gay and lesbian issues. But, in fact, Joe Lieberman was the Senate's most zealous standard-bearer for the rights of gays and lesbians to serve openly in military. He'd sponsored the Senate's repeal bill, and he'd fought vigorously for its passage. But at the December 9th Senate session, chances for repeal were looking poor. Republican foes had imposed on Lieberman's bill so many procedural hurdles that the New York Times declared it to be at death's door. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, the only Republican who seemed in favor of ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, told the Times reporter, "I'm sad to say the chances are very slim for getting it through." The vote in the Senate was scheduled for December 18th, 2010. J.P. Purcell and Diane Wickman were watching in their living room as the Senate proceedings were broadcast on C-SPAN. Purcell and Wickman were the two Coast Guard women who'd feared the hug after Wickman's bloody car because her superior was on scene. Oh yeah, so one of them, I don't remember who, was in the military, and she got in a car accident. And after the car accident, she used her cell phone and called both her girlfriend and her commanding officer, I think, or something. And they both showed up like at the same time. And the commanding officer was like, "Why are you here?" to like her girlfriend or partner or whatever. And the partner was like, "Oh, I'm just like a concerned roommate." And then the CO was kind of like, "Well, I'm here. I've got this. Like, you don't need to be here. You can leave." Right? And the one who was like in the car accident, who was like bleeding and like upset and stuff, she like wanted to hug her and like be comforted by her, but instead she had to brush her off as if she was like a roommate so that her CO didn't find out she was a lesbian. So yeah, that's the context. Now, before J.P. Purcell and Diana Wickman tuned into C-SPAN, they hung an American flag on one side of their TV set and a Coast Guard flag on the other. The two retired officers, I guess they were both officers, I don't know, still had their Coast Guard caps from their service days. They held them on their laps as they watched. Soon after the roll call vote began, it was pretty clear how it would go. Purcell and Wickman put their caps on their heads and stood up at attention. Senate Leader Harry Reid announced that the vote was 65 to 31 in favor of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. 8 Republicans had joined the Democrats. In their private little ceremony, the two women brushed away tears in between saluting the flags. As Wickman would recall, each of them had given 20-some years to service to their country, and now it finally felt like our country was validating us, like we were part of America. It was healing. At the signing ceremony for repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the president told a story about his visit a few weeks earlier to troops stationed in Afghanistan. He was working the rope line, shaking hands with soldiers who lined up to greet him. A uniformed young woman in the line shook his hand, and then she hugged him. "Get Don't Ask, Don't Tell done," she whispered into his ear. President Obama told her, "I promise you, I will." After his speech at the December 22nd ceremony, he sat at a table on stage and encircled by Patrick Murphy, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Lieberman, Eric Alva, the gay Marine who'd been the first American casualty in Iraq, and half a dozen others who'd pushed to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He bent his head and signed the bill that repealed the policy. Then he looked up and grinned. "This is done," he said. Needless to say, not everyone in the LGBT movement was thrilled. The dust-up over the right to serve in the military was the culmination of a 60-year battle between the radicals and those they called the assimilationists. New York public advocate and civil libertarian William Dobbs, a distinguished-looking, stentorian-voiced gay man, bore an uncanny physical resemblance to Admiral Michael Mullen, even to the round, wire-rimmed glasses they wore. Dobbs' appearance seriously belied his impassioned radicalism. Wrong-headed ambitions, he thought, have distracted the LGBT movement from momentous aims such as those dreamed by the Gay Liberation Front decades earlier. Bringing economic justice to the indigent, social justice to minorities, whether straight or gay, sexual liberation for everyone. He'd been an anti-war crusader, both Vietnam and Iraq, a gay liberationist, an act-upper. Those were his kinds of movements, calling the government out for its wrongdoings, demanding the right to be free, battling dramatically for underdogs' lives. He believed that the LGBT movement had gotten hijacked by assimilationists who shifted its resources and energies to all things conventional, such as the right to marry, which, quote, feeds into the drive for homogenous Orthodox American culture, end quote, and even worse, the equal right to serve in the armed forces, to wear a uniform and march in lockstep and salute some clowns who outranked you. What could be more inimical? Oh my gosh. What could be more inimical? Nope. Okay, I'm giving up. What could be more inimical to liberation? If you can't tell, I'm really tired. If you listen to my past readings, I don't stumble as much over my words. I'm so sorry, guys. Dobbs was especially disgusted by tactics of Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal groups that trundled around the country gay veterans who'd been in Iraq, pulling them out as patriots, never looking at the bigger issues connected with the military, for instance, its role in defending the failures of U.S. foreign policy. He believed that gays and lesbians' desire for equality, a low and paltry ambition compared to liberation, which is as big as space, had blinded them to the lunacy of militarism. But Dobbs's radical rhetoric was gibberish to gays and lesbians who'd been in the armed forces and had wanted to serve, and now finally, as Diane Wickman said, like we are part of America. July 22nd, 2012, San Diego. The Navy town, where 55 years earlier, retired Rear Admiral Selden Hooper had been called back to active duty only to be court-martialed and stripped of his rank and his pension because of his homosexuality. The Navy town, where 18 years earlier, lawyer Bridget Wilson had defended a naval officer who had been discharged because he'd told when he'd asked for a 2-day leave to be with his partner who was dying of AIDS. It's the day of the Gay Pride Parade. The lineup begins as usual, a contingent of Dykes on Bikes motorcyclists, the LGBT American Indian nations of the Four Directions, and the parade's board of directors, and then, a sight never seen before. Marine Sergeant Briss Holland, back from 2 tours of duty in Iraq, is dressed in her Marine bright white dress uniform, carrying the American flag, looking very solemn, as though fully aware of the dignity of her role and the long history that preceded it. She's followed by lesbian and gay service members from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. Many are in full dress uniform, though it's a sweltering Southern California day. Others wear fatigues or t-shirts that identify their branches of service. 2 elderly retired colonels, Vietnam vets, 1 Army and 1 Marines, are wearing all their medals. There's also a 46-year-old commander who will retire in a few months after 26 years in the Navy. An Army truck displaying a service member's legal defense network, Freedom to Serve banner, and flying dozens of rainbow flags moves slowly alongside the marchers. A crowd of over 200,000 onlookers line the streets for blocks and blocks and cheer them on. Those in the throng not busy taking pictures are waving little American flags. Briss Holland's 7-year-old son is holding her partner's hand. When his mother marches by, he, too, waves a little flag. A middle-aged woman who's wearing a rainbow-colored lei around her neck holds up a sign that says, "My gay son is a naval officer." She's saluted by young military people as they pass. And that's the end of the chapter, guys. The next section, what was the name of this section? That was part 8, Demanding to Serve. Even though it wasn't just like these 3 chapters that were about like gays in the military, because like there's like stuff in like starting in like the 30s where gays were being like hunted by the like military police basically, which is like at the beginning of the book. And the next part 9, LGBT American citizens. I think this is the first part where we really move on from like gays and lesbians to like LGBT. So yay. Yeah. I'll read this also and leave it on YouTube. We'll see. Oh, this chapter 28, how lesbians and gays stopped being sex criminals. Well, that's good. Wait, I'm actually confused though, because okay, maybe I should reread some of this, because like before this chapter, they said that one of the problems was that you couldn't just like say it was legal, like even if a president signed something saying it's legal to be gay in the military, that the military had like its own, like each branch of the military had its own like sodomy laws basically. So did all the militaries like agree to get rid of those laws as a result of this bill of Congress, or did the Congress bill like nullify those laws? It's unclear to me. I don't really understand exactly what's going on with that. Also, I have to say, I thought Prop 8 would be in this book. Like, there was, like, this mention of it in this chapter was the only mention of Prop 8 so far. Which I'm, like, vaguely aware of, but it was, like, I don't know, I wasn't born yet or something. I don't remember. I don't know exactly what. It was in the 90s, and I was born in the 90s. So I don't actually know much about it. I just know that it happened. Will I be doing more RadFem discussions? I am planning. Okay, guys, for those of you who don't know, who are just tuning in live because you got a notification that I'm doing this right now, I have been reading this lesbian history book, which has gotten me actually quite pissed off, because they're like, there's a whole chapter about women who dressed up as men so they could like earn incomes and own property and, you know, be with women without being like harassed and killed and shit. And she like uncritically like calls all of the women who lived as men he, and even at one point asks, is this a same-sex relationship if the other person is like two-spirit or whatever? And it's like literally yes. I don't know. There's like several issues with this book, but anyway, I want to finish this book, and after I finish this book, I have other books I'm going to read. I will show them to you now. These are the next 2 books I'm going to read. Mostly I'm trying to focus on lesbian things, but what I'm trying to do is get more like lesbian history, kind of as like a context to start like with. So that's what this book is. For now, there's other lesbian history books that I would like to read, especially like about women's land and stuff. Yeah, so that's like kind of like part 1 of like my goal with reading, and then after that I'm gonna read like lesbian theory stuff. So one of the books I definitely want to read is like Lesbian Ethics by Sarah Hoagland. But I have a few books now that that I own. So this one is not lesbian specific, but it's radical feminist, and there's like a section about lesbians, so I was like, good enough. It's a collection of essays by Marilyn Fry. It's called The Politics of Reality, Essays in Feminist Theory. So this is definitely radical feminism, like legit. What year is this from again? 1983. Yeah. Then, and my primary goal with this is to like get things that are inaccessible and read them onto the internet so that they become accessible. So, like this is pretty accessible. I got it on Amazon for like $12 or something. This one I think is out of print, and I haven't been able to find a place to buy it. So I would very much like to put this entire book onto YouTube. This is also a collection of essays. This is called Lesbian Psychologies, Explorations and Challenges, edited by the Boston Lesbian Psychologies Collective. I wonder if there's like a history book of like lesbian history in like Massachusetts or something, because there seems to be a lot of shit that comes out of there. Anyway, then here it lists the members of the Boston Lesbian Psychology's Collective. And then it has like a ton of essays inside, which are not only, which I think they're by like random lesbians that were like edited by this Boston Lesbian Psychology Collective. As far as I can tell. We'll see. Anyway, there's like a couple different sections that each have like 5 essays or something in them. The first section is called identity. The second section is called relationships. Third section is called family. The fourth section is called therapies, and the fifth section is called community. It's very interesting. Like, listen to the title of this one. It's called "Doing Sex Therapy with Lesbians: Bending a Heterosexual Paradigm to Fit a Gay Lifestyle." Listen to this one. This title: "Coming Out to Mom: A Theoretical Aspects of the Mother-Daughter Process." I don't know. Sounds fucking interesting to me. And based on it being published in 1987, and also by the topics that are discussed, it seems to me like it's going to be quite like radical feminist-y. And even if it's not, like sophistries, even if there's some stuff in there, that's pretty queer and non like homosexual focused, that's okay. I'm happy to read things that I disagree with, that challenge me, that I find upsetting. Like, I'll just like have to make a video voicing my opinions about it afterwards. Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna start off with, is these 2 books of a bunch of essays. Like today, I read. Let me see how many pages I read. These books are all like roughly similar in the size. Actually, the font on this one is smaller. So I read from 5:13 to 5:30. I read 20 pages today, and it took me about an hour. So this book, each of the essays are roughly 15 to 30 pages, and there's 20 essays in here. So that's going to be like a month of reading, I think. This one's a lot shorter. It's like 5 essays, but presumably they're longer essays. Okay, 9 essays. The whole book's only 170 pages though, so should be pretty doable. Yeah, anyway, so these are the books I'm starting with. If you would like me to read other books, I have a gigantic wish list of like 35 lesbian history books / radical feminist theory books / lesbian feminist theory books from Amazon that I will put in the description. It's in the description of my other videos that I've done recently of readings. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do it exactly. Like, as I've been reading the Sophistries book, I've been almost trying to treat it like an audiobook. Because a friend of mine who gave me this mic, my lovely friend, was like, you should export the audio from your YouTube videos as you read these and just upload them as podcasts, and then people can just like, while they're jogging or while they're like driving to work or something, they can just listen to these books that they otherwise might not read. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I've been taking it like very seriously. But when I've been doing this like Lillian Faderman book, like the one that I was doing today, I have been taking myself seriously because I'm like, I've started like 2/3 of the way through the book anyway. So nobody's gonna be like listening to this like from beginning to end. So I've been like stopping for commentary and like stopping to look at what you guys are saying and stuff. And I'm not sure which perspective is better. Also, with like the Sophistries book, when I have like commentary, I'll like end the video and end reading, and then I'll start a new video just for commentary because I'm trying to like keep them separate. So somebody could just listen to it like an audiobook without having like commentary in there. I'm not sure which way is better, to be honest. I think maybe. I mean, we'll see. I think I'm gonna read the Marilyn Fry book next. And we'll see what I do, what you guys want me to do. What, like, if you guys tell me, like, I really like it when you do the commentary directly afterwards, or the commentary even during reading the essay, maybe that's what I'll do. You guys tell me. Oh, you mean the podcasts? Yeah, so few problems. First problem, I don't have a computer big enough to like store videos that I can like move from like where I've recorded them onto like a thing to upload them because my computer does have like a really small hard drive. So that's the first problem. Second problem is like doing them live. Not that many women are comfortable doing them live. And even if they are, sometimes there's issues with their internet, or issues with their audio, like things that you can kind of plan for, but not totally. Um, and also issues with time zones. That's why almost all the people I've talked to, I think all the people I've talked to so far have been Americans. Um, because it's really difficult to like schedule with like the Europeans or something when you're trying to do everything live. Um, yeah. And also like a bunch of the people who were on, they've kind of moved on to do different things or they've become more aware of like the hazard of having their face and name associated with these opinions. So I've taken down a lot of the videos. I think there's only one post-gender funk left. I would like to restart it in the future. I'm just not sure what form it would take. Maybe I'll end up doing a purely audio format. Um, and I will strongly encourage my guests to use pseudonyms so that we don't have to take them all down later. Because like some of the ones that were up, like eating disorder one, I got a lot of positive feedback from a lot of like dysphoric females, like trans men and detransitioned women, saying that they really really resonated with them. And they really liked that one. And some other, I can't even remember all the topics anymore, but I really no, no Canadians. I think we're just too small of a country to have like the amount of detrans people who want to be like vocal about this is pretty small. So I think it's just like statistically unlikely that a bunch of them would be Canadian because I don't know if you guys know, but Canada's really small. We're like 1/10 the size of the US anyway, like population wise. So yeah, those have been the issues with the podcast. So, no, I didn't mean geographically. I know Canada's quite big geographically, which is also a problem because I think we have like 5 time zones, 4 time zones. I don't know. I think we're the country with the most time zones. I think. Anyway, um, yeah. So for now, the reading is like very low investment for me. I don't need to like plan ahead and come up with like interview questions and like a topic and find people who want to discuss that topic and like schedule like with the time zone issues and like set up like a thing to do before to check like audio and like check internet and like I don't know, like this is like super easy for me to do. Also I've always wanted to read these books anyway, and so now I'm like doing them but also sharing them with you guys. Um yeah, I agree. There are a lot of detrans people who oh, by the way, check out detransvoices.org. Very good website that's run by Carol. Well, not she's one of the people who's running it, Carol, who is from the podcast, and for those of you who watched it. Yeah, detransvoices.org. Yeah. Like one of my goals with my channel, like generally when I started the channel, like I kind of wanted to be like interviewing detrans people eventually because one of my goals was to like humanize, like put a face to like the detrans issue because I feel like a lot of the way that it's discussed is very like, oh, well, some outliers, like who cares, you know? But if you like see the face of a person telling you their story, it's like very different. You can't really just be like, oh, well, it's just some person who cares, you know? I mean, at least I hope so. Um, so that's kind of what I was trying to do, but yeah. I think maybe an audio only, or maybe the guests will have to be audio only, and like me and Carol or whoever my co-host, maybe Carol, I think she will still want to be a co-host. It's unclear to me. Um, and me and whoever the co-host are, maybe we can use our faces if we're cool with that. Um, so yeah, I think that would be cool. But we'll see. I'm doing a lot of stuff, guys, that you just don't know about. Like I'm doing advocacy stuff, like detrans advocacy stuff. And I was doing a lot of work with like lesbian community building in Canada, or Ontario specifically. I've been doing a lot of stuff that you guys don't know about that's like very time and labor intensive. And so that my YouTube channel kind of took a back seat because I was like, is it that important? Not really. Um, and like the stuff that I already have on my channel like reached a lot of people and helped a lot of people. And I'm kind of like, well, that's something good. I don't need to keep putting like stressing about it, like doing many, many takes until I record things in a way that I think is like good enough, and like editing stuff or like what I really stressed a lot about my YouTube videos in the past. Something else that I might end up doing is finding people who want to be involved and getting them to like basically do research for me and like write me drafts of scripts, and then I can like clean up the draft the way that I like it and like do scripted videos. That would be like way less work for me than like um I mean, I'm not sure, but I've considered that because I have a few people who might be into helping me, like people who want to like who have similar opinions to me and would like to have them like voiced and like consciousness raising in like a similar way that I do, but are not in a place to like put themselves in front of a camera or to like anything like that, you know? So I don't know, that's a possibility. Oh, thanks, Infinite Verb. That's nice of you. How do I find my experience similar or different than the old lesbians and queer women? Oh, there's a part of the book that we just read. I don't remember where in the book, but that they talk about the love that dare not speak its name. And I'm not saying that we live in the same time as like, the 40s or 50s where it was like literally like like society at large was a huge hazard to you, at least in like the US or Canada, for example. Like, I'm not saying we live in the same situation, but I do feel like, I mean, something in the end of this chapter that we just read, the guy was like, whatever that billionaire, was it the billionaire guy? Yeah. Um, or whoever, whatever. Some guy at the end of the chapter was like, the assimilationists have taken over and they have like superseded the radicals. And I really feel that. Like, I think in a lot of ways, I'm more of like a radical type. I don't really think those labels like can be applied so like directly to the world we're living in now, but um and I view like, for example, like trans lobbyists, like I mean like I don't mean people who are trans themselves because they could be, but I mean like people who are like that like LGBT lobbying groups that are like basically only advocate for like trans issues now and like completely don't care about any gay issues. Even ones that were like they used to be kind of like mainstream issues like LGBT homelessness. Now like they almost exclusively focus on like trans homelessness and stuff, and like their biggest focus is getting trans homeless people like medical care and not like getting them jobs and getting them off the streets and like getting them homes and stuff, you know. Anyway, like those types of groups and stuff are like huge, especially in the US. They get like huge amounts of money dumped into them by places like GLAAD and Stonewall and stuff, you know. Like in the UK, Stonewall, like these huge organizations that used to be specifically for helping gay people are now spending like insane amounts of money specifically on trans stuff. And like you can look up I think there's this graph that I saw a couple times that I think is like representative of, I think Stonewall in the UK has like an annual general report or something. And somebody has graphed out their use of like the words lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And the use of the word lesbian has like, it went up a bit at some point, and now it's like almost completely gone. It's the lowest it's ever been used now. And somebody went through the painstaking process of looking up the word lesbian at every point in their report. And like most of the time that they're using it, they're referring to trans women, not even to like actual lesbians. And I mean, you can see this in um Lambert House in Seattle, which is like a gay community center. If you look up like their organizations and like events and stuff, if you look up for like lesbian stuff, I mean, at least the last time I checked, there wasn't anything for lesbians. There's stuff for like queer women. Um, or like the 519 in Toronto. There's nothing for like lesbians specifically. There's stuff for queer women, which in my mind is like a kind of assimilationism of like, I don't know if it's not the right word, but it's like a kind of, I mean, yeah, they're trying to like assimilate like people who take part in like heterosexual society with like the lesbians who don't take any part at all in any heterosexual society, and say that they're the same and there's no difference between them, and that they only have each other to support each other, like that they can't have anything separate from each other. um I even looked up, was talking to somebody, they were like, no, like in North Carolina we have so many lesbians, there's like huge lesbian community here. I looked up, like, I spent like half an hour looking for like any lesbian specific organizations or groups or events or clubs that are public, right, in North Carolina, and there's none. And I view this as like a huge like push for like assimilationism in a way, um to like get the homosexuals to stop trying to define themselves as homosexuals as a distinct group, and to like assimilate into like the queer, um uh what's that word that people use, like into like this queer monolith kind of. And yeah. Like, so obviously it's not the same thing as back in the day, but I view it as like being a lesbian is still, or has re-become, the love that dare not speak its name that it didn't used to be. Um have I investigated pharmaceutical money behind trans funding? Uh I've read like 2 articles about it or something. Honestly, I don't really feel qualified to comment on that or to vet the sourcing on those articles, because I don't think they were like in mainstream publications. They were like medium pieces or something. Um, and even if did know what it was, I don't think I'm in a position to do anything about it. So I kind of feel like I'm going to leave that to other people. Um, but definitely there. I mean, like, what the fuck was the source of that? I think this was from a mainstream. Okay, I don't know where this thing came from, but I've read this several times and I can't remember where the fuck it came from. That like it's estimated that, I think this was an American-based thing. It's estimated, well, it must have been because they are the ones who spend insane amounts of money on healthcare. Like an individual person's transition will cost them on average $150,000 over their lifetime. And so there was some kind of a projection based on that and based on the amount of people who are transitioning about like um the gains that the medical and pharmaceutical industry will make off of that, and it was like, in the billions. So I mean, obviously something is, I mean, like, you don't even if you're a trans person, there are trans people who are like, they're trying to profit off of our suffering. And I'm like, yeah, like literally. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you sit on. It's, like, even if you're a capitalist, it's very obvious to see, like, of course, this is like a market that's being tapped, right? Um, but anyway, back to that original question. So this whole love the dare not speak its name thing and the assimilationism thing. So I see the assimilationism thing from like 2 different perspectives. I see it from like the queer wanting, like the queer theory wanting us to become like a monolith, even though like historically lesbians and gays and bisexuals and trans people have not really got along, which you would know if I had read this whole book on YouTube. I'm sorry. Um and I also see it from the perspective of like heteronormativity of like the trans, which like, when I say this, I'm talking about like the current trans. It wasn't always this way, which I'm not saying I supported it when it was a different way, but I'm saying like, I'm just being specifically, I'm talking about now. The trans like ideology is based entirely on the denial of sex, of the existence of sex, saying that sex doesn't exist, and in the context when they acknowledge that it exists, they say it doesn't matter. Okay? How can you be same-sex attracted if the people who are like your allies, who are like replacing lesbians in like boards on like big LGBT organizations, the people who are like guiding the funding, because there's more funding in trans now than there is in like LGBT or anything that's labeled LGBT. If you look at the way that they allocate their money, it's like trans specific now. How can we be like lesbians or homosexuals be like supported and like actually advocated for by people whose like goals are like diametrically opposed to us, right? And so like again, I see this like as an assimilationist thing. They want us to like assimilate and become like one. Okay, I don't. Obviously, this is like off the cuff. I'm not articulating myself very well. They want us to assimilate into being like bisexual and therefore like not homosexuals anymore, in order to like validate that sex doesn't matter, and to like obviously like sexually validate people who claim that their gender identity supersedes their natal or physical sex, right? So I view it as like a two-pronged assimilationism, like one way through the route of like heteronormativity and one way through the route of like queer ideology, but they actually are like the same thing, right? Um yeah, it's interesting. Reading this book has given me a lot of ideas of like things that like lesbians could be doing. But the problems, there's like a few problems. First problem, nobody wants to put their face to anything because you will get like retconned, like you could never get hired again or something. Like imagine if a group of like militant lesbians held a ZAP, which is like for those of you who weren't here, is like kind of like a civil disobedience type thing, which is like very very like dramatic and attention getting, um like meant specifically to get like media attention. Um like the best zaps in the 70s were the ones that like made like the CNN news and stuff. So they were like really about like getting media attention, whether positive or negative. They just wanted people to know like we are here and like we are not happy with this situation specifically, whatever it was. Um like I thought about like could lesbians do zaps now? Um and like no, because I don't know many lesbians who would be willing to like risk their future careers or like risk their family safety or anything like that by getting their face put up on. It's not the same as like if you held a zap in like Iowa and your family lived in New York in the 70s and your name wasn't like the interviewers, you gave them a fake name or something. It's not like people can like do a facial recognition search and find out who you are and like dox you through your social media or something, right? Like we're living in a different time that it's not like safe to do these things. Another problem is that like all lesbians I know who are into this kind of stuff, who would like be interested in like doing some kind of like activism, like in like a kind of more radical way, they don't have money. Like I don't have money. Like I or like the time because we all work. But we don't have the time to like spend hours and hours and hours working on this stuff. Um I think that the only way to combat that is to have like a really like to reach critical mass in numbers so that even if each individual person can't spend that much time working on it, collectively you will have a fair amount of like labor put into it. Or even if individually you can only donate very small amounts of money, collectively you'll have enough money to do whatever you're trying to do. But that's not happening. Like the vast majority of lesbians now are like homosexual denialists or whatever. That they're like, you know, they'd rather be seen as queer because that's like more acceptable. Um, and they like are kind of like brainwashed into thinking that homosexuals are turfs and turfs are evil and like no more thought necessary on that topic. So like it's just I don't know. I'm getting a lot of ideas from this, but I'm not sure like what like practically what can be done. Um yeah, but what infinite verb? Because like Like I was thinking we could try to take the suits perspective, right? And try to take like legal cases to court, like in civil cases, um, to set like precedents, or human rights cases to set precedents for like a protection of sexual orientation, even when it conflicts with gender identity. But like again, you need people who are willing to take those kind of cases, which pretty far and few between, at least of the people that I know in Canada. Like lawyers, I mean. Then you'd also need people who are like good cases, like good situations that would work well for that purpose. That also the people involved are willing to do that, something so public, like again, that would get them like talking to politicians directly, anything other than like a court case. It seems impossible to me because like the only people who talk to you are conservatives who are not going to do anything to like preserve like sexual orientation, right? And even if they could, like they never, I mean in Canada at least. I'm speaking about Canada because that's like my thing. Um and even if they could do something to protect sexual orientation specifically, um they don't usually have a majority in my country, so but like nobody's gonna, everybody else except for the conservatives are more liberal or socialist, more far left than them, so farther to the left than them. And nobody who's farther to the left than the conservatives would ever speak to like a militant lesbian group, because I'm sure they would view us, or even if they would speak to us, they would realize after like, oh, this is like not yay trans, and that's what like all the liberals are doing now, is being like hurrah trans. So they would like, I just don't see like I was kind of viewing civil disobedience as a way of like at least bringing like the mainstream populace into like knowledge of like something is very seriously wrong here. Like the lesbians on chairs thing, that wasn't even a civil disobedience thing, but I think it got some media attention in the UK. And if we could do something similar to just be like, for those of you who don't know, the lesbians on chair situation was this. Um, maybe something with academia, but I don't know. I mean, that's also like very, very, would be very, very difficult. Um, but maybe that's something you could, that's more like people doing their PhD theses or something. They have like, I haven't thought about that just right now. I thought about, anyway, the lesbians on chair situation. There was like these lesbians in the UK who are like, I think they were involved in like the Get the L Out and the lesbian not queer like demonstration at Leeds Pride. I think they're the same people, but I might be confusing them with someone else. Maybe Manchester Pride. I don't know. There are some lesbians who did a bunch of cool shit in the UK, is what I'm saying. They met up at some cafe, I think in Manchester. Again, I'm not sure. You guys can look it up. Just Google lesbians on chairs. I'm sure there's like a Medium piece or something. Or a thread, Twitter thread you can read. And they went to some cafe and they were, or a pub or something, and they were sitting around drinking beer or something. And they were all wearing those shirts that were like lesbian, homosexual female, or like woman, adult human female. And basically, I don't know who it was. If it was like I think it was one of the bartenders, but it might have been a patron. Somebody went up to the staff and was like, "We're not comfortable with this, like, exhibition of transphobia. We can't like we can't comfortably like be in this establishment because of this transphobia over here." And instead of being like, well, they're lesbians and they have a right to like say that they're lesbians, even if that is like upsetting to you or something, they kicked them out. They kicked the lesbians out of this place, so that like the trans people who felt invalidated by like the definition of the word lesbian wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable anymore. And I just feel like that's the kind of thing that like if news got a hold of that, like an average mainstream person who doesn't know about the gender wars, who would read that would be like, wait, what the fuck? I thought that everything was like yay queer now. Everything is like yay LGBT. Why are they like harassing lesbians for being lesbians? You see? Like To my mind, what would be great is if the lesbians there, I'm not there, I'm not telling them what to do, but like this is an idea I have to do, which will hold like a sit-in or a sip-in, depending on which thing you're referencing, or to like 20 of them all put on shirts that say lesbian, homosexual, female, and all go to that establishment which like kicked them out and like sit there and refuse to leave until the police showed up. Right? Like that would probably make some kind of headlines, and that would get like the average person who doesn't know about this issue some kind of knowledge about it, right? Maybe that's the thing to do. Groups of lesbians to get these shirts and go to places that they know are like anti-lesbian or anti-homosexual and just sit there until the police show up. I also wonder what the police would do actually, because technically, at least in Canada, we have like a right to freedom of expression and free speech, and sexual orientation is a charter right, which is kind of like a constitutional right. We have a constitution too, but charter rights are a different thing. Like our constitution isn't like the American Constitution. Fuck, well, this has been productive. Hello, Claire. Okay, I'm gonna read your stuff now. I've been rambling for like half an hour. Izzy is saying, sorry, when somebody tells me to look something up on a live stream, I have to immediately open a tab and Google it, because I'll definitely forget as soon as I end the live stream. She says, you should check out Last Spectress on YouTube. She did an epic takedown of ContraPoints and also talks about her experience as a Mexican lesbian when she was in the woke communities. The video is over 1 hour long. That's my kind of video, guys. Have you seen all my videos in the recent past have been like over an hour long? She sounds cool. Dude, Infinite Verve, are you Canadian? Hit me up on like Instagram or something. Are you a lesbian? Have you guys seen the lesbian Me Too hashtag? That could be another type of thing to do like a zap with. Would be for like lesbians to show up to like a rape crisis center that is like male accepting and like telling like I don't know, but basically trying to draw attention to like the fact that like they prioritize males when males are the problem, whether they identify as female or not. It would be very difficult to like I've been trying to think of like zap ideas, and it's very difficult to think of ones that will not immediately be branded as transphobic by like mainstream journalism. But maybe we need to have the same goal as them, which is to just get attention to the issues and hope that people will start to investigate the issues themselves rather than trying to get attention to the issues in like the exact way that we want them reported. Also, if you have like a good media strategy and everybody who gets spoken to by a reporter will only say the exact same like one or two statements or make the exact same 2 points in their own words, then the only thing they have to report on if they're trying to quote somebody is those things. So oh my god, what are you saying would be controversial? Um yeah, I mean, I know the police in Canada are not like to be counted on in this way, but I mean, I know in Church Wellesley in Toronto, which is like the gay neighborhood or the gay village, I guess. 'Cause I don't really know that many gay people live there. Um, there's like a task force or something. I just know when I go down there that you see cops who have like rainbows on their lapels, and if you talk to them, they'll tell you that they're gay. And I wonder how many of them are into all the militant queer stuff and how many of them are just like plain Jane type gays, you know? Because I've I've met a fair amount of gay people, especially these in their 30s and especially the ones in their 40s or older who don't really know what's going on and are not really involved. Um, yeah. Oh my god, this is the most people I've had on the whole stream. I guess I should like not read books and just chat at the camera randomly, and that's how I'll get more people to watch my videos. I mean, if my goal was to get people to watch my videos, I wouldn't be reading like on my YouTube channel. Yeah, the bar sipping is good. I think it would be interesting. Like, there's um, I don't think gay bars are the place to do this, but there are like queer cafes or even like gay community centers in Canada where this might be a good thing to do would be to show up with lesbians and like have some kind of shirts or have some posters with some demands and just like sit down and refuse to leave until I mean, but this isn't really what a zap is. A zap is supposed to be like very dramatic. Like people are holding a conference and you run on stage and you like have a speech prepared and you refuse to give up the mic until it's like physically ripped from your hands and what you're saying is like the opposite of what they're saying or something. Or like you go to a fundraiser and you're all wearing the same outfit underneath a nice outfit and you take off the nice outfit so you're all wearing like a purple shirt or something and you like chain yourself to the seats of the fundraiser and then you all start like yelling so like the fundraiser has to stop or something like that where like it's like people cannot not give you attention kind of a thing. I don't know, obviously I haven't like spent a shit ton of time thinking about this. Infinite Verve says Canada pretends nice but we need to be more truthful about things that happen here. There are a lot of women slash violence issues. Yeah, for sure, man. Um, for sure. Oh, am I? Okay, Izzy Fox says, I think you're confusing a couple different events. Lesbians on chairs were at a pro-trans speaking event and people were worried they would disrupt the event, but they were just there to listen. Okay, you may be right. But there was definitely a situation because I remember them saying like that like the LGBT Alliance, the people who support LGBT Alliance, that kind of thing should like boycott this pub or whatever that they were kicked out of, like that they were just like sitting there drinking and having their own. I think it was like after something that they did together. Like I think they went to do some kind of event or protest or something, and they were wearing their shirts still, and they just went to sit in this pub. I mean, I should just look it up. Like, okay, or a live stream. Like, it's fine. And I think the lesbians on chairs thing was that they're like. Ah, you're right. Okay, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Um, yeah, you're right. They were holding. They were. Yeah, I remember this. Okay, well, based on my misremembering of the situation, what I was imagining was some lesbians sitting in a pub and getting kicked out of the pub just for wearing these shirts. Um, which, like, again, if somebody was inclined, they could, in Canada, if something like that happened, they could presumably take the establishment to court or something for like banning them from being there, for expressing their freedom of expression, which is like a legal right in Canada. Um, that these people would have to go to court and mount a defense of saying the definition of homosexuality is like bigoted, right? um, yeah. Oh, you're sending an email? Yeah, my email does work. I just don't check it that often. But if I like email you a bunch or maybe become friends, I'll like start texting you or something instead because like, yeah. Is there an LGBT alliance in Canada? Yep, there is. Um, I think the concept of LGBT alliance is like interesting. Um, I like the fact that it seems to be very much lesbian led in a lot of ways. At least Bev Joe and Linda Bellows, right? They're the leaders of the LGBT alliance, like the UK, like the central one, right? Unless I misinformed or forgot or something. That seems cool to me. But I honestly feel like I don't know, guys. Like, I think one of the reasons now that a lot of lesbians feel inclined to work with like gay men and bisexuals is that they view it as like the enemy is so great, we need to work together because we're so like they're so overpowered compared to us and we're so outnumbered. But I think that there's something to be gained by doing lesbian only things. Um Especially in terms of building community because I think there's something that you can get out of a lesbian only event or space or group that you can't get out of an LGBT group, even if they're all like staunchly in support of like homosexuality, right? Um, yeah, it will definitely take years. I mean, like this book in the next chapter, 28, they're about to finally talk about the sodomy laws, right? And that's like 2010. And this fight against sodomy laws, the first person to ever try to like kind of fight that in court, I think was in like 1930 or something. I don't remember. It's at the beginning of the book. But like, no, 1940. Whatever. Either way, it was like 70 years of like fighting in court before anything got done. Like the way that the like laws or social norms have changed to be like so gender centric and like anti homosexuality in the last 2 decades or something, or even in the last decade. I mean, really, this stuff really got kicked off in 2015. It's insane how quickly it everything got ramped up. So like everything changed so quickly. Like this kind of stuff, like the gender identity bill in Canada, like the that like basically anybody can go into like whichever washroom or change room they want, and if somebody questions like why are you here, the only thing you have to do is say I identify as this. You don't need like legal documents proving that you are the sex you claim to be, even like like not like literally but like in like an identity sense. You don't need like psychiatrists to have like signed off on this for you to have like the right to do that. All you have to do is say I belong here and that's it. um so like those kind of laws, like there was, maybe still is, a small radical feminist contingent in Canada who wanted to repeal that. And I mean, strategically, that's pretty fucking pointless at this point because, I mean, that's not going to happen. And also, like, I mean, it's just for many reasons, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. However, there are people who are like, this is like, these are problems, we need to fix them. But it's like, I don't know. I also just feel like the concept of where you need to go back to how things used to be is like kind of nonsense, because even if like a lot of gender critical people, like not radical feminists, but gender critical people view they kind of see like a time in the near future, or I don't know, relatively near future, like next couple decades, where people will be like, oh my god, we were medically transitioning kids when there was like no scientific data proving that it would make their lives better. In fact, we had scientific data proving that it would fuck up their bodies and prevent them from ever experiencing sexual attraction. Like, why do we do that? That seems bad. That society will make like a 180 on this stuff. Or that there will be like a time in the future, I don't know, in like like a decade or two, maybe longer, where people will be like, it's really weird how like all of these men who are convicted of rape conveniently start identifying as women and go into women's prisons. And that society will make like a 180 on like we need to like unquestioningly affirm gender identity. Like a lot of gender critical people see this happening. And I feel like that's kind of really optimistic. I mean, historically, if you look, like, if you're doing this from like a male violence or an anti-homosexual violence perspective, that has always been a thing that like society at large is happy to look the other way about. That society is like always willing to make excuses for like men who do perpetrate violence. Like even now, after Me Too, has the rate of like rape convictions gone up? No. Like society at large, and like especially in institutional senses, is not going to like radically change its mind because like a portion of society has recognized that like this is like very, very troublesome. So I think that's very optimistic. I think that from a very practical standpoint, we need to find ways of like making sure there's legal ground to stand on for women who want their sex-based rights upheld, and lesbians who want their sexual attraction to be like a protected characteristic in like a real sense. Like we need to get legal precedents for that kind of stuff. I think that what will happen is that there will be some kind of a legal, I don't know, some like very complex legal stuff that will make the two of those things exist beside each other in a way, which seems impossible, but I don't see us turning around from what everybody has, from the what society at large is viewing as like progress or like civil rights, right? Um I'm just saying. I mean, as a radical feminist, this is not what I want, but as I'm saying, like from purely practical perspective, I think that's what's going to end up happening, really. So I think we need to be like very pragmatic about it and like sit down and think like what's realistic and what's doable and how do we do that. Um okay. Lesbian only usually gets shut down or taken over. Yeah, I know. But there's a few loopholes for that. Um so there's two loopholes to that. First loophole um is you have a members only event or group, and so people have to pay like $2 or something, or not even pay, but they have to sign up and be approved to become a member. And then your groups are for members only. And that's a way you can vet to make sure that all the people who join are like actually female at least. I mean, you can't really vet for sexual orientation, but you could vet that they're all at least female, right? Another thing you can do is declare yourself a church, which depending on where you live, like which country you live in, is actually fairly easy. And if one of the tenets of your church is that it's female only, I mean, legally, any trans woman who wants to enter, they don't have a right to, because it's against your church, right? Those are the two loopholes that lesbians have if they would like to set up lesbian only events. And then the other one, obviously, which is like the way most people are doing it now, is just to keep your shit like underground, which is like, I think that's one of like the bigger problems right now, is like when you keep everything underground, Like, if you think about it from, like, again, like, a very, like, a numbers standpoint, think about the number of lesbians right now who, when they're like, "I think I'm a lesbian," and they start looking for LGBT stuff to, like, understand themselves and feel less alone and all this kind of stuff. The first things they're finding is, like, queer theory and all this stuff. So, um like, the amount of lesbians who are interested in lesbian-only things is, like, really small. And I don't know what else I was gonna say. So let me remind you what I was saying. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, the underground stuff. So, I think one of the biggest problems that we have right now, like, as lesbians, is if you are a lesbian who has been kicked out of your university LGBT group, or a teenage lesbian who has been canceled at your high school, like, on social media, because you turned down a trans woman, who's, like, in your class or something, or anything like this, which is, like, a common everyday lesbian experience. Or even if you're a lesbian who is young, like, under 30, who is doing something professionally, who has, like, a name to uphold and, like, a job that they wanna keep and this kinda stuff, who knows that you're a homosexual, and you have to go to, like, sensitivity training where you, like, learn about pronouns and you're not gonna say anything against that, and you get invited, like, with other queer people to, like, a queer event or something. You're not gonna say anything and get excommunicated from your only other people that you know who are not straight, right? When you're like, there's a lot of lesbians, I think, right now who are in a situation where they know that they don't agree with this stuff. They know that they're homosexual and that their community or, like, society at large doesn't support them as homosexuals, and so instead of, like so they end up in a situation where they just have to, like, bite their tongue all the time. If you're one of these types of lesbians who has been, like, canceled or kicked out of things or is, like, isolated and alone and is, like, basically closeted, like, in the sense of, like, you can call yourself queer, but you can't, like, um, name your boundaries. If you're one of those types of lesbians right now, there's nothing publicly that you can search, like, lesbian things and be like, "Oh, yeah, there's this lesbian group in Canada that I can, like, join, and then I won't feel so alone." Because there's nothing like that publicly. The only groups that okay, actually, wait, there's one. The Vancouver Lesbian Collective is the only one I can think of. Um, they're pretty radical. They're pretty badass. I like them a lot. But anyway, if you don't live in Vancouver and you want real life lesbians to hang out with, because that's the other thing is, like, all this stuff online is, like, great and everything, but actually it doesn't go very far compared to, like, you know, real life connections. If you're one of these lesbians who is, like, isolated, who knows that there's no support for you, who knows that you can be canceled or who has already been canceled or doxxed or whatever, there's nothing that you can find real life to find support. Also, like, if you're, like, a young lesbian who's just, like, struggling to figure out her sexuality or who's just figured out her sexuality and is, like, completely alone and wants to find other lesbians, like, there's nothing for you to, like, find. And I think that's, like, the next thing that lesbians need to do is create, like, visible groups, even if the group is visible but the members are invisible, right? A group that is like, we are, like, homosexual only, female only, and these are, like, our beliefs or whatever. And you have to be, like, vetted to get in, and once you get in, you have to, like, I don't know, something about, like, to keep people's privacy, right? Like, if something like that is what needs to happen next, because there's nothing for lesbians, and, like, if there's nothing for lesbians, then how are lesbians supposed to do any activism or any community building, right? Like, you need a place, like a hub, a social hub for lesbians to, like, meet each other and talk to each other and get together before you can hope to do anything else as a collective. I have to let my cat out 1 second. Tell me your thoughts and feelings. Oh, what's up? No. It's only 7. It's not food time. Oh, Bev Joe is a different person? Well, whatever. I got Bev right. which is pretty astonishing because I'm so bad with names. No, I understand that I'm a different voice, and in some ways, I provide um, isolated lesbians with like a sense of hope or community in some way, but it's not enough. I mean, seeing someone speak on YouTube, even if you message me on Instagram and I message you back, like honestly, I'm one person. When I get messages like that, it's like I say like, I'm really glad my video helped you feel less alone, and like I listen to their stories and I respond and stuff, but it's like I don't have the energy to become friends with every single person who has seen my videos who feels alone, right? Like it's just I I, I don't. I'm one person, and we just need lesbian communities, basically, is what I'm saying. And after we have lesbian communities, then there's like a possibility of like activism. Um yeah. Like another thing somebody asked, like what's similar between like, or I don't even know what the question was, but something else that I'm thinking of that's like similar between like the book, for those of you who are here who were not here earlier, because I assume that's a bunch of you. And now is that there were some situations, because like the lesbians and the gay men kind of didn't get along like most of the time. And one of the few uh exceptions was when they were like both in like for the legally for being homosexuals who were under like the same threat. And now that's what's happening, which is why you have groups like the LGBT Alliance, because gay men and lesbians are under the exact same threat, facing like, well, not exactly, I mean, obviously misogyny. So, under the same threat, facing similar problems. And so when you're in a situation where you're very, very desperate, you will cling to like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. But I think in a lot of ways, like, I don't know, I'm not trying to be mean. I like the LGBT Alliance, the concept of it is obviously good. Um, but I feel like it's gonna lead to like a generation of like gender critical lesbians who don't have a radical feminist perspective, who are going to view like almost uncritically view gay men as their allies. And historically that is not usually the case. Um and like after this battle is won or whatever, they're going to go back to like doing what they do and like protecting men in a lot of ways and like upholding sexual liberation perspectives that are actually quite harming to lesbians and stuff like this. Um yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now. Guys, what do you have to say? Yeah. Um I also think that the lesbian communities will be very important because we need an intergenerational lesbian community, because like even me now, I have a handful, like at this point 2 lesbians that I'm friends with who are over the age of 40, like in real life. And even they have so many experiences and perspectives that are like completely different from mine, that maybe even clash with mine in some ways, but that are like very, very valuable. Because when I go on Tumblr or Twitter or Instagram and I look for lesbians, I find all people who have like pretty similar perspectives and experiences to me of like, yeah, I was in the queer community and then they fucked me over and I realized they are actually like very anti-homosexual and like will support sexual violence as long as it's against the like correct enemy and stuff like this. Like, yeah, okay, that's all good and stuff, but like talking to lesbians who were like, yeah, there was a community before and this was what was good about it and this is what was bad about it, or like, yeah, I was around when this thing happened and this is what it was like and this is what I learned from it. Like that's invaluable, and that's really missing when you're on just like Discord servers or something. You know, I mean, funnily enough, one of my friends runs a Discord server. I think still, I'm not sure if she still runs it because I don't go on Discord, but the one like one of my older friends. Um, yeah, like yeah, I just think that the intergenerational thing is like really important. Um, there are kind of some downsides to that. I mean, I'm in like some Facebook groups, which I really don't like Facebook. I go on like once every 6 months to see what's up, and then I'm like, okay, I saw, I'm good, you know. Um, I'm in this one Facebook group, which I will not name, which there's quite a few like young ex-queer types in there, and you will have the older lesbians, you know, like belittling and disparaging. Oh my god, these young queers who are just like capitulating to like this like heteronormative, anti-gay, anti-homosexual, anti-lesbian ideology, who like can't stand up for themselves, can't think for themselves, blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, it's easy for you to say that because you didn't grow up in an environment where you were like love bombed and then like faced like very serious repercussions for not complying with like the group, you know? Um like it's something completely new that they didn't experience firsthand. They got to watch it happen kind of. Um like from an outsider's perspective a lot of the time, as far as I can tell. And so there are like some downsides to the intergenerational thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, isn't it like that every single community that's like, well, we had it harder in our day, so what are you complaining about, kind of thing. Um, I don't know. Same thing with detransitioners in those groups. Um, you'll have a lot of like young rad femme type lesbians who are like absolutist in their support of detrans women. I mean, not all young radical feminist lesbians are like that, but I'm just saying there's like a contingent of them that exist, right? And then you will have a lot of the older ones being like, ugh, well, they were stupid and destroyed their body for no reason. Like, they don't deserve our compassion because they like gave up on supporting women and instead like ran away with like their tail between their legs. This kind of thing is what they will say. Basically being like, it was harder in our day. Now that you guys have it easier, you're still too like, you know, pathetic to stand up for yourselves or take care of yourselves or whatever their point is. And like again, they don't understand. Um and I think a lot of that, I mean, what you will have in any feminist group or lesbian group is like an externalization of their own misogyny or an externalization of their own homophobia, um, which is like, of course, really sad. Um, anyway, I didn't really mean to go off on this tangent. I'm just saying we need real life shit happening, is what I'm saying. As somebody who has experienced that, there's like no replacement for it. By the way, if you're like a lesbian in Ontario, hit me up. I'm kind of doing some things. Um, but it's not like a super priority right now because I'm mostly doing detrans advocacy things, and because there's like no one else doing that in Canada. But also, um, with COVID, like before this, I was planning some real life things, and like that had to stop because COVID. So like that's pretty annoying. I can't wait till everybody's vaccinated. And then like I don't think things are gonna go back to normal, but we can at least do like meetups outdoors without being like we're all gonna kill each other and stuff. Aromantica says straight men and women have more in common since they often shack up together than lesbians and gay men do. I mean, yeah. I'm gonna go through this book and like find there's like a chapter specifically on lesbian feminists, and then there's like sub parts of other chapters that are like specifically about like what the lesbians were doing or how they disagreed or what the problems with the lesbians and the gay men were. And I'm gonna go through this book and like bookmark all those and just like sit down and do a few readings probably and just read all that stuff. Because even if like I don't want to read this whole book on YouTube, but I think that this like I feel so dumb. I always thought that like we had each other's backs. It was like gay liberation for everyone and blah 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 blah. But like it's like that thing where like any radical feminist will tell you like any situation where you introduce men, they'll like suck all the oxygen out of the room, and like center themselves without even realizing it. Or if they do realize it, they feel so entitled that they don't care that they're doing it. Um, yeah, this book has been a little bit eye opening for me. I wonder if there's books specifically about like the tensions between lesbians and gay men. Um, it's actually been quite annoying looking for like lesbian history stuff. A lot of it has been very like queer centric kind of things. Um, yeah. So I'm not going to find like, critique of that. Well, one of the essays in this book, it's called Lesbian Feminism and the Gay Rights Movement, Another View of Male Supremacy and Other Separatism. So some people were on top of that shit. I mean, if I just keep reading second wave feminist stuff, second wave lesbian feminist stuff, I'm going to find more of that. Oh my god, Izzy is so nice. She says, sometimes it's enough just to watch your videos. That's why I'm glad you are reading lesbian history books to us now. Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty excited to start the essay books. Um, and there are also like two Canadian lesbian history books that I really want to read, which are the only two I've been able to find. If you can find more, please tell me. Um, yeah. One of them though is like $100 to buy. So I don't know if I will get it anytime soon. Like at least I'm not gonna be able to afford it anytime soon. But if one of you lovely people is like some rich fucker, please buy it for me. um, I think it's The House that Jill built. Um, it's about the lesbian organization of Toronto, which existed in the 80s, which was like radical feminist lesbians. Also, I'm sure once I get the book and can find names in it, if there's like full names in it, which I assume there is, that if I like look hard enough of the lesbians that I know in Canada, I can actually speak to some of the lesbians who were involved in those organizations, which would be like the dream. Um, but I don't know actually, because I know some women who used to be lesbian Avengers, and they literally like if you ask them like, "Oh, what's going on with the lesbian community where you live or something?" Like, I don't know. I'm just like married and settled down, and I don't know what's going on with lesbians anymore. Um, so maybe I'll just be disappointed if I try to meet them. Infinite Verve says, I think people get hardened and hopeless and tired. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm in my 20s, so maybe it's not going to happen to me for a while, but maybe it'll happen to me eventually. It's hard to imagine that it would happen to me, but I'm sure a lot of the women who that's happened to would said the same things when they were in their 20s. No, I don't think all old people are like that. The older lesbians that I'm friends with are not like that. Actually, the two older women that I'm friends with now went through a period of like disidentification or like as identifying as male or agender or non-binary or something in the last couple years because this stuff is so strong. And so they understand um how powerful it is even to them who like had been part of lesbian activism for like 20 years that it was able to like take hold of their minds. So to them, it's like obvious that it's having a huge detrimental effect on the younger lesbians who that's the only community like LGBT community they encounter is that, right? No, I don't think all old people are like I don't think all the older rad femmes are like that or all the older lesbians are like that. I'm just saying that I've tried to kind of do more intergenerational to like make intergenerational bonds, and I have been disappointed quite a few times. Wait, sorry, infinite verb. I wasn't like reading the message as you said the stuff. When you said it's been difficult to speak about this kind of things because it gets shouted down. What are you talking about? Um, oh, I'm not aware of this. Somebody said, Izzy said, "Do you have Lesbian Revolution by Sheila Jeffries?" That one talks about the lesbian feminist movement slash community in London. It was written pretty recently, so you won't read it, but is it on your list? It is not on the list. Um, but I didn't know that she'd written anything recently. I don't know. I really want to read Lesbian Heresy by Sheila Jeffries, um, because so many people have told me that it's like eminently relevant to what's going on right now. Like, especially, I don't know if you guys know, on lesbian dating apps, there's like this huge surge in like sugar mamas. At least, like, from the perspective of there used to be like none on lesbian dating apps. And now, like, okay, as somebody who used to be on gay men's dating apps back in the day when I was like a gay man, um, when you get on there, if you're young, one of the first things that happens is that you will get like a bunch of random messages from dudes that you didn't even like. You don't know who they are. You never talked to them. You never like liked their profile, anything. They just message you, being like, "I want to be your sugar daddy," kind of a thing. Um, or just offering you money outright for sex. Great. Um, and recently, like sometime last year, or like a year and a half ago, me and like three other friends were all, I think, using her. I mean, I assume it's like, yeah. And we got together for like a coffee or something, and we got to talking about her, and all of us were like, "Oh yeah, I got like two messages from somebody offering to be like a sugar mama." Or like I got like a couple messages in like a span of like 3 days. I got like four messages from women like saying that they're like really into like this kind of BDSM and they want me to like be their sub or whatever. And it's, I'm not saying that lesbians have never had kinky stuff. I mean, obviously I'm aware of this. I'm just saying though that like from what I understand, Lesbian Heresy by Sheila Jeffries, a component of it is about how like lesbians have internalized like male homosexual culture as like lesbian culture. Um and that's like really really like visible and relevant now as a way in a way that didn't used to be. um, or in a way that it was like when Sheila Jeffries. What year was that written? 1993. But I mean, clearly it's just gotten worse, is what I'm saying. Um, yeah, I want to read some Jeffries stuff, like as a personally, but I don't think I'm gonna read it on YouTube because all of her stuff is basically available in all of her older stuff is available in free PDFs online, and I'm assuming even her new stuff that if you talk to the right people, they'll send you a free PDF of it or a free EPUB of it if they already own it. And like I'm sure you can buy it on Kindle for like a few dollars or something, or whatever people are using to buy their books now. No, I know women's history libraries, so I've actually tried to look into that. I think that the only option I have now is to call women's bookstores and hope the person who answers the phone is not like a queerio and will not get offended, and ask, "I'm looking for this like lesbian feminist book by this title and I can't find it for sale anywhere and it's out of print, or I can only find it for sale for like $100 and it's out of print. Do you have a copy or do you know who I can contact to get a copy of it?" That's like my one idea. Um, Another idea is to contact the women's libraries that do exist and just ask them, like, I want to own a copy of this. Do you have any ideas for me? There's very few of them left, um, at least in like that I'm aware of that I've looked for. Like there was one in Vancouver, but it ended up closing. Shocking. Um, I don't know where the books went from that, so maybe they would actually be able to like sell me one for less than $100 or something. I'm not sure. Um, I bet if I contact the Vancouver Lesbian Collective, they'll know somebody from that library. Um, Let me actually look it up. Let's look up a big library, Toronto Public Library. Because another thing is like I understand like libraries and being loaned these books and stuff, but if it's hard for me to get a hold of these books now, how impossible is it going to be for me to get a hold of these books in 20 years? Like I want to own copies of books that are hard to get a hold of now so that I own them, so that I can lend them to women who want to read them, so that I can like own a copy in the future, basically, when they're like even harder to get a hold of. You know what I mean? Um, a friend of mine had this idea that the lesbians who know each other in real life, um, where I live, could like start like a lesbian lending library. And it would just be like very informal, kind of like a spreadsheet, and then it's like listed who has the book, and if you want to read that book, you like contact that person and you lend it to them. And like I would love to do something like that. Um, yeah, especially like in the future. Like I said, like when these books are even harder to get a hold of, because like I also feel like there's so much second wave feminist literature that is not cataloged on Amazon or Goodreads that I don't know how to like gain knowledge of its existence, you know? Never mind find a copy of it. So maybe I'll is there like a or like a women's library in the UK that is not like anti-feminist third wave nonsense? Maybe I'll travel there one day and sit down and write a list of all the books they have that I want to read. Oh yeah, what was I looking up? Yeah. Because I also have friends who are like, in many different universities, also doing masters or PhDs who have access to books other people don't have. But like, maybe the thing to do is to like get one of them to take a book out and then to like scan the whole book and upload a PDF online for people to access, like for books that are out of print. Yeah. The Toronto Public Library, which is like, I assume, one of the biggest library networks in all of Canada, has one copy of this book, and it's for reference only. And it's in the Toronto Reference Library. So, um, which can be hard to get in, especially certain floors. Like you can't just walk in and pick up a book and read it. Some of the books there. So, no, I didn't think you were like digging on me, bro. Oh, you're called grumpy old git. Are you old? Like, are you like over the age of 30 or something? Like intergenerational, like not a millennial. Um, yeah. Wait, what do you mean push the trans thing? Like the lesbian Avengers were in support of trans women in women's only spaces? I just mean like not the person who grew up in the queerness. Like most of the lesbians that I know who are under the age of 25 or 30 even have at some point identified as non-binary or a trans man or something. or at some point identified as like pansexual or queer or something because it was like more socially acceptable, right? I mean, people. I'm looking for people who came of age or who came to accept their sexuality in a different climate than mine. Is what I'm saying. Sorry, I'm not articulating myself so well. I'm very tired. I've been up since 5 in the morning. Yeah, the virtual lending library thing is a great idea, but again, I'm very exhausted and have no energy, and somebody else can do that. Um, to be honest, I don't know a shit ton about the Lesbian Avengers. I know that they were like radical feminist consciousness raising types at the beginning. I also know somebody who was involved who said they were like there was like lots of racist shit going on, which is like unsurprising. But I'm sure that depends like on the chapter. I'm sure if they were in like, you know, whichever community that was like majority women of color, that it wouldn't have been the same racial dynamics as like a majority white community, right? Um I also have this book about the lesbian Avengers, which I'm going to read, but I don't think I'm going to read it onto the internet. Because reading stuff onto the internet is very time consuming, so I'm going to try to pick what I'm doing carefully. Um but what I might do is with books that I read by myself is to like bookmark all the pages that have like super relevant stuff in it and maybe read like a few stories out of the book onto the internet. Yeah. Grumpy old git said, I love being old 45. You get to be eccentric as you want. I always called myself androgynous, but I consider this an external aesthetic and never my biology, if that makes sense. Yes, that does make sense. Um, I've even met lesbians who were like 30 who were like, yeah, when I first came out, I was just like androgynous. And nobody questioned that if that made you a lesbian or not, or nobody told you that you couldn't be a lesbian because you're so androgynous or something. And now it's like you must be a non-binary or something. Uh, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna eat something because I'm hungry. You guys can keep like asking me questions and stuff, or converse amongst yourselves or something. I'm gonna eat a bit though. Last time I ate on camera, it was Popeyes. Today it's McDonald's, but both times it's chicken nuggets. I mean, unless you guys have nothing left to ask me or nothing left to say, then maybe we could end the stream. Um, Infinite Verve says, I see the non-binary thing used the way that androgynous was used. I don't know. I mean, that's what I thought. Oh, you have to open the door. I just closed the door. 1 sec. What is it? It's not food time. You're gonna go out again? No. I'm just gonna feed her 1 sec. Fine, I'll feed you. You know, I've never had McNuggets that are 5 hours old, but it has to be said they're quite soggy and not that great. Shh. No, not this is garbage. This one. Look. There you go. Yeah, isn't it awesome? I use it so that she can be protected from the other cat, which is not my cat, my roommate's cat. Because if the roommate's cat comes to eat, she will just fucking sit there and watch the other cat eat all her food. So this is my way of like kind of keeping her separate in what she's eating. Oh yeah, the non-binary thing. So I used to also think it was like kind of androgynous. And at a point it was very much of a fuck gender in the sense of I want people to look at me and not be able to tell if I'm female or male. Obviously though, this is not attainable by like the vast majority of people. And so because everything queer needs to be super inclusive and accessible, that didn't stay that way for very long. And now there's a lot of people who call themselves non-binary who are like aesthetically and visually completely gender conforming. And some of those people mean it in like a social way of I don't conform or don't feel comfortable conforming socially to gender. For example, I don't want to like have children. And of course what they're doing is instead of saying women don't need to conform to gender rules, they're saying because I don't conform to gender rules, I must not be a woman. So instead of like broadening what it means to be a woman socially, they're like jumping out of womanhood so they can do what they want socially. You know. And then now you see it even less of like a social discomfort and more of an identity in like the very real sense of an identity of like I identify with this belief, therefore I'm non-binary. Or like I identify with like this personality or this group and I want to be seen that way, and therefore I'm non-binary. And it has like almost nothing to do with like I don't know, it's just so bizarre. Or people who are just like some days I wear skirts and some days I wear pants, therefore I'm non-binary. It's just like it doesn't at some point it did mean something and it was kind of interesting and pretty cool. Like genderqueer was like that too. But like it's changed so quickly. I mean, I wonder if the end point of queer theory is that everything is so inclusive that like the only word acceptable anymore is queer. You can't even say non-binary or trans or anything because those are exclusionary. They exclude people who are, well, I don't know. I just mean we're kind of seeing that with sexuality now. That when you say gay, the only thing that it's allowed to mean is queer, right? Like functionally. When you say gay, it doesn't mean homosexual anymore when you're in a queer space. And anything like pan and bi, they're both inclusive, right? So with sexualities, we've seen everything become like as inclusive as possible till basically everything means the same thing. And I wonder if we're going to see something similar to that with gender. Oh, I saw this survey recently. You know the non-binaries? I mean, okay, at least back in my day, when we first started to become aware of them. I mean, back when I first became trans, I made fun of them because they were like, that's funny, that's ridiculous, what is that? Like in 2010. And then in the last couple years, they were always saying like, we're the most oppressed trans people because we're the most oppressed queer people because even among trans people, we have so little visibility, so little representation, and we're like so outnumbered. And now I saw this like I don't remember what it was. It was like a trans what's that organization in the US? Whatever. Some trans health organization or some shit did some survey. And like the category of gender identity, which there was like 20 of them, that had the biggest number was non-binary. Like and like women or like trans women or trans men or whatever were like at the bottom. They had like the very lowest number Like, way more people identify as trans feminine or trans masculine than trans man or trans woman. And so they can't say anymore that they're outnumbered and that there's no representation of them in like queer organizations and stuff. Because I'll bet you that, like, I mean, I haven't looked at this, but I'll bet if you look at like LGBT organizations, that they're like the number of people who are in them who identify as non-binary is actually quite significant. So. Oh, that's great. He says, just to be warned, at the end of Lesbian Heresy, there's an extra essay she had written and added. It contains quotes of a real-life account of a graphic description of Nazis torturing a gay man. Fucked me up. Great, thanks. I will not read that essay. I watched that what was that documentary with like, or not documentary, that like movie with like Jim Parsons and the Hulk guy and a bunch of them, who was like Lonely Heart or something. It's like some movie about the AIDS epidemic. I watched that, and like watching all of them die, I cried a lot, and then I was depressed for like 2 weeks. I can't do like sad stuff really. Like, even like Lillian Faderman's book is actually not super depressing, because every time something super depressing happens, you know that like by the end of the book, it's like they have gay marriage and like it's illegal to like discriminate against them in housing and stuff. So it's not like that bad. Like, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Sophistries, the lesbian history book, that's pretty fucking bad. Even though you would think that it's the same thing because eventually lesbians have like more whatever. Just reading about these women who were like put on trial for like counterfeiting the position of a husband or something, or like women who were like, I don't know. There's this one story of this indigenous woman. I don't remember what tribe she's from. But she's like this like fourth gender, which is like women who are like still known to be female, but like socially can like take like in take on the roles of males in the tribe. Not in like uh like rituals and stuff, but like when it comes to like hunting and stuff. And she gets like a wife, which again, I don't think they got to take part in the ritual of marriage like the heteros did. So I don't even, but the author calls them a wife, whatever. Um, and like she ends up having 3 wives over her lifetime, and all 3 of them leave her because like the homophobia is so bad that like all of the men taunt her wives so much that they are like, we can't take this anymore, and they leave. And then at one point, the men who like made her second wife leave her, I think, like rape her to like show her like what a real dick is, because they presumably like they're like, you think you're a man but you don't know what a man is or whatever. I don't know. That shit like really fucked me up. I'm also just like generally with radical feminist stuff, like Andrea Dworkin, for example, like it's just so heavy. Like I can't even read a whole chapter at a time sometimes. Like it's just so heavy. Um, so that's why I'm kind of into these like essay books, because I could read like an essay from this and just like put it down for weeks and then read another essay from it, and it's fine because there's no like continuity because they're essays, right? Um, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the lesbian Avengers were like the Mattachine Society, where it was like one of them, I don't know anything about them, really. One of them was like started somewhere, and then somebody was like, I want to take and do the same thing where I live because I don't live where you live. And then they like kind of did their own version of it. But like obviously there was like they were all based on the same ideals, but I assume like over time they evolved separately and like were different from each other. Um, Depends how strictly they were governed. Like some of the stuff in the like history book, like the Lillian Faderman book, um, there would be kind of like a head office or like a board member of directors or something, and they would send out like letters saying like this is our official position on this, and like you're not allowed to speak to the media about this or whatever. And so they were kind of in lockstep with each other, like fairly like in a decent way. I mean, LGBT Alliance is like this. They have like they're directed by the UK people, but they do their own thing also in different countries. Like they have different issues in different countries, different like leaders who think different things are important, right? So yeah. Oh my god, Butch Femme. Bro. I don't know enough to have this conversation yet, but I have so many thoughts. But I will reserve them until I've read. I think some of those are on. There's like some books that are kind of like a compilation of like stories or essays or whatever about like Butch Femme dynamics. And I think one of them is like a history of like Butch Femme in like lesbian culture or something. I feel like I need to read those because also I know that they're like at least like after like the sexual revolution stuff that they're very much tied to like BDSM, and I don't know enough about that to really critique it. So I need to read about Butch Femme stuff, and then I will share my thoughts on it. Because I know if I'll do it now, I'll just look back and be like, "You, what the fuck were you saying? You should have kept your mouth closed until you knew what you were talking about." If any of you guys are on Instagram, go follow me. And if any of you guys want to be invited to TikTok, fuck, Clubhouse. If any of you want to be invited to Clubhouse, message me on TikTok or email me. And I can send you a Clubhouse invite if you have an iPhone with iOS 11 or higher, or you have an iPad with iOS 11 or higher that can receive text messages because you have to text invites to Clubhouse. If you don't know what Clubhouse is, don't worry about it, or you can Google it. I'm gonna shoot something else. If you have Goodreads, I'm gonna put my Goodreads in the description of this video, but also it's in the description of my last couple videos where I've been reading books. So you can follow me on Goodreads if you want. Recommend books to me, or just see what I'm reading or whatever. Also, you can message me on there. Verb, I don't totally understand your question. You said, did you find a difference in help for trans men versus trans women? More exposure for one or the other? What do you mean a difference in help? Like, can you expand on that? I'm not quite sure what you're trying to ask me. Izzy says, I called myself queer for like 15 years, thinking it was just a hip word for young lesbians, gays, and bis. I bought the reclaimed slur thing. I mean, yeah. It's hard not to buy into it when it's like a community consensus, right? Aromantica says, I think it was kind of like that, Izzy, until people realized there were loads of straight queers. Yeah. Also, as I understand it, in like the 90s, queer was like not what it is today. And that there was very much like an intentional reclamation by people who had been like victims of that word. But that's like it's completely devoid of that now, right? Now it's like all these people being like, yo, I'm so queer and like I love the queer people and blah 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 blah. When like number one, they're straight, right? And number two, they will like outright deny that queer is a slur. Meanwhile, like depending on which part of the world or which part of your country you live in, you'll be like subjected to that word, right? Um, I don't know what you mean, Verve, about the BDSM stuff. I mean, like, I know even at like women's music festivals, lesbians would go there to hook up, and there'd be like BDSM parties and stuff. So like, they weren't just doing it for the male. I mean, okay. I mean, obviously, women do things in private that are like to conform to like what's socially acceptable or socially praised, things that they've internalized that they don't realize. But I don't think it was done exclusively for that. Not totally sure, but thanks. I'll think about it. The Butch is really super aggressive, but I've heard the opposite. Like, not the opposite exactly, but I have talked to Butches between 30 and 40 years old. Even Butches between like 20 to 30 years old who say that now, when they hook up, that their partners treat them as if they're basically men. And then when they don't, fulfill this expectation, that the women that they're hooking up with are like, why did I even hook up with you? Like, I might as well have like hooked up with like a guy or like a real girl and not wasted my time with you, kind of a thing. Um, which is like obviously homophobic and misogynistic. But as far as I'm aware, there are a lot of butch women who don't like this like expectation of like sexual aggression. Yeah. Oh yeah. So Infinite Verb has expanded on her question. So she says, did you find a difference in help? Help meaning more services, spaces for one or the other. Sorry if that wasn't clear. For trans men versus trans women, more exposure for one than the other. Yes. So there used to be, back in the days when people were like not so obsessed with being inclusive, groups that were for like trans men and trans women that were separate. And I mean, because obviously, like the experience is different, right? Obviously. Then I don't know exactly what happened because trans men outnumber trans women now, right? Which didn't used to be the case. Well, maybe that's. I mean, I don't understand what happened exactly. But now, if you look for trans resources, like at like a community center or like a mental health program or something, they're all like connected. And if you go, at least in my experience and in the experience of like a fairly decent amount of, well, it depends where you go, right? But in a lot of these mixed sex groups, what happens, which is like not at all surprising if you're a radical feminist, is that the trans men feel like, this is like my assessment of the situation. The trans men feel that they're there to cater to the trans women, and so it's not really about them, and so they're not really getting much out of it, and so they stop going. And so what happens is like a de facto trans women's group where a handful of trans men show up once in a while. I mean, I know there are some places, like for example, in like oh my god, in Silicon Valley, right? Or no? What's that? Or the Bay Area, that's it. Where there's like a huge amount of trans people, where you will actually have some like separate sex separated trans groups because there's like just an insane number of trans men. And I'm not quite sure what goes on at those groups or how helpful they are. Because even in those groups, now, what is like true for trans women is like taken on as if it is true for trans men. And so I think even in a group setting like that, you might not actually be getting that much like help or like understanding, you know? I mean, I'm not quite sure. But that is my experience at least. I wonder, I mean, I don't know. Maybe when things are back up and running, like in real life, I'll enter into some trans groups. I actually know some trans women who kind of like a handful, like 2 or 3, who were like, "Yeah, I have gone to a trans support group several times saying that like I'm dysphoric, so I feel like I have a right to be here." Um yeah, anyway, I'm not sure. But I would like to see like what's going on now. Yeah. Oh, thanks for your compliment of my Instagram, Izzy. Basically, I don't spend much time on social media these days. So I will just like go onto like the Twitter accounts and Tumblr accounts of people that I know who have like very well curated feeds and then like, reblog their content or whatever it's called on Instagram, post their content. So um, it's not exactly my curating that's high quality. It's the people that I'm looking at whose curating is high quality. But thanks anyway. Okay, guys. It's been 3 hours. It's 8. I need to get in bed around 9. I'm gonna wake up at 5 for work. So I'll let you go. At first, I was trying to like schedule these to be like Mondays and Wednesdays or something, or Mondays and Fridays. But now I don't know. I don't want to stress myself out because then I'll just stop doing it entirely. But I will finish both Sophistries and the Lillian Faderman book, and then start the Politics of Reality book. At some point. If I can do about 2 readings a week, I'll be happy with that. No, don't be sorry, man. I'm happy to sit here and talk with you guys. It's actually like I think of things here. I don't know, like I guess it's because of like a different type of stimulation or stimulation from different people, but it like makes things occur to me that never occurred to me before. Yeah, no, it's like I appreciate it, guys. Or guys. If there's any guys watching, I'm not talking to you. I'm joking, or not. I don't think I'm joking. Yeah. And every time I'm done this, the readings, usually I end the video and start a new video immediately. And I like deconstruct what I just read and like my thoughts and stuff. But today I just kind of, as I was reading, would stop what I was reading and say, this is what I think of this, right? So it wasn't really necessary to deconstruct my readings, but and then when I do the deconstructing of what I was reading, I like just interact with the audience. So no, like I'm happy to be here, guys. It's really nice of you to say infinite verb. I will check my email eventually, like in the next couple of days, and reply to you. I don't know why, but emails make me anxious, like generally. I guess because it's like more serious than like Twitter or Reddit or something. And in a way, I don't think we really got derailed from the reading. Because in a way, I think we were relating our current time to like what was kind of being like gay history or like gay and lesbian history in general. I have to be honest. I'm really not looking forward to the rest of this book where it's all very LGBT, because I feel like it's gonna, like, because there has been nothing trans up to this point, I feel like the author is gonna try to, like, as a form of balance, focus very much on the T. So yeah, I'm finna verb. I'll answer your emails. If we're both in Ontario, we should try to meet up sometime. I mean, unless you live in like North Bay or Timmins or something. But even then, I'll probably get out there eventually. If you live in Thunder Bay, though, probably will never meet you, to be honest, because I'm not going out there because there's nothing to do there. Okay. I mean, yeah, don't be sorry that you're not in Ontario, man. Especially now for COVID. Like, fuck, man. I hope you're not in Vancouver. Anyway, like for COVID reasons. Izzy says Sheila Jeffries talks heaps in her books about. Oh, are you in Vancouver? she just replied dot dot dot. Okay. Um, heaps in the books about BDSM takeover of lesbian culture. There's some videos about it too. There's great YouTube footage of a debate panel Linda Bella spoke on back in the day. No, I mean, bro, I'm not trying to insult Vancouver. I'm just saying I know that they have like variants and crap over there, just like Toronto does. And so I hope that you're not like in a very like bad hot zone of like variants and whatever. I've never been to Vancouver. I'd like to go sometime. Maybe for a road trip. Who can afford the gas though? For people who don't know, that's like driving from Buffalo, New York to Seattle. It's a bit of a drive. Oh, about the COVID thing. Yeah. Well, at least I don't live in a gray zone, which for those of you who don't know, the gray zones have been like, they have like a curfew. Yeah. So that's fun. At least I don't live in one of those. Anyway, okay, enough chatting. I keep saying goodbye and not leaving. Just like the same time, same thing happens every time I do this. But I should really go. If any of you know a woman who's getting rid of her library or downsizing her library of second wave literature, email me, okay? And if any of you know of a women's library that closed down or that is still in operation or something like that, that I could hook up with them to get books, let me know. Yeah. I remember like in 2015, I think, that I was in some kind of group and some woman said that she was moving and couldn't take her books with her because she was moving to like a different country or something. And she wanted to donate them all to women. So she was like, tell me where you live and email me for postage and I'll mail you my books. And I was like I was living in like a student housing at the like in dorm, and I didn't have like space for books. And I also like didn't know exactly. I felt like there was other women who would like appreciate them more, who would know more what to do with them or something. And I feel so like I don't know. I feel dumb. Like should have seized the opportunity. Oh my god, emailing authors. I totally forgot. Especially feminist authors. They're probably just like happy people are like, I read your book or I want to read your book and like I'm a feminist and I agree with you. I bet you they'd be so happy to hear from people. Well, yeah, the authors that are left, yeah. Anyway, okay. I'm gonna actually say goodnight, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to my channel and press the little bell. And that way, next time I start a stream, you will get a notification. And then you can just like tune in. Because I am not going to try to schedule one because I'll just stress myself out. But hopefully, like I think I'm busy on Friday and Saturday, but maybe Sunday I'll do a stream. Also, Monday I'm off from work and I'm not busy, so maybe Monday I'll do a stream or 2 streams. We'll see. Um, okay. Have a good night, guys. See you later. You didn't get a notification? You know what I think I need to do then? I think I need to schedule my stream like an hour ahead of time, and then you will get a notification 30 minutes before saying GNC Centric is about to start a stream. Because I think because I have like multiple YouTube accounts because I'm like crazy and like that I just like watch YouTube on different accounts, but I want to like curate my the algorithm to watch different types of things. And I have like one of them subscribed to this channel, and I got a notification on my phone the other day being like GNC Centric's stream is starting in 30 minutes. So, okay, I will schedule my streams now at least 1 hour in advance so you guys will get notifications, hopefully. Also, if you have Instagram, follow me on Instagram, and usually I will post on there. As far as the Lillian Faderman book is, I've kind of given up with trying to help people follow along because also the book is really long. Like I'm in chapter 28 now. I don't think there's anybody who's been around since chapter 21 or since chapter 1 who's still like following. Because also I started it on Clubhouse and then I was doing it on Instagram and now I'm doing it on YouTube. So, but with the lesbian history book, I've been or it's not a lesbian history with the sophistries. I've been posting every time on Instagram that like, oh, I'm gonna read it today at this time. So if you check my Instagram, um, I will post about it there. Anyway, okay, enough chatting and explaining and re-explaining things. Yeah, buy me some books from my wish list, guys. Okay, night. I hope you all have a really awesome night. Bye.